Hey, my name's Chris. I'm an audio engineer. I'm 27 years old and I've seen many films about 9/11, beginning in 2004 with the film In Plain Sight. And not too many have been made about the airplanes. We have September Clues, the Great American Psy Opera, the Loose Change films, and a few others. I always wondered if the people who made these films came up with a theory and whatever didn't fit into the theory, basically they just left out of the film, because a lot of evidence is missing from some of these films and is very misleading. I would like to make this film and take the audience with me through the evidence, and wherever the evidence leads us, that will be the conclusion of this film.
The date is December 31st, 2000. It's New Year's Eve in Sri Lanka, South Asia. The Sunday Times newspaper runs an article featuring Arthur C. Clarke. The famous science fiction writer states that perhaps no other year before or since 1984 has been awaited with such eager anticipation. It was my friend Stanley Kubrick who chose the year to name our film. And more than 3 decades later, I have no idea why he did so. But it has turned out to be quite apt, as the intelligent minority of this world will mark January 1st, 2001, as the real beginning of the 21st century, and the third millennium. As we welcome 2001, let us harness our collective energies to create a culture of peace and a land of prosperity.
You know, there's that dreadful word alchemy, which we mustn't use, but it was a form of that in a way, that was creating new metals, you see.
Some of us need to wake up. I'm awake, rise and shine, I ain't got time to waste. My mind is straight, the design is great. Every rhyme I make could define my fate. Wake up.
A lot of people have made the claim that 9/11 was predicted before the events took place. Not only in Hollywood and the mainstream media, but in video games and children's entertainment as well. At first I thought this was pretty outlandish. As it turns out, we were shown these images many times leading up to that day.
And you're gonna see the Twin Towers come crumbling down.
Wake up, I'm awake, rise and shine, I ain't got time to waste. My mind is straight. It's gonna knock down the towers. The towers are falling. Remember those Twin Towers? I don't think they're gonna be so tall anymore.
Establish a new world order.
These so-called predictions seem to come from certain individuals as well. One fairly obvious one is that of William Cooper. Bill Cooper was murdered by the police about 2 months after September 11th. But on June 28th, 2001, he gave us an amazing radio broadcast.
And now we're being bombarded with messages that Osama bin Laden is planning to attack the United States of America and Israel. And I'm telling you, be prepared for a major attack. But it won't be Osama bin Laden. It will be those behind the New World Order. And whatever's going to happen that they're going to blame on Osama bin Laden, don't you even believe it.
Now, some would just call this coincidence theory, and others recognize it as predictive programming. No matter what you call it, the connection is there and has an effect on our consciousness.
Mass perceptions are affected by what is shown in movies. We have a film which highlights free energy technology and seemingly foreshadows 9/11. People will often readily accept Hollywood perceptions of reality over those in scientific journals.
Wake up, I'm awake.
One of the earliest predictions was in the 1963 farewell address to the nation by President Eisenhower.
The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
Some would argue this was more of a warning that we chose to ignore. We've all heard of foreknowledge in the Bush administration, but Eisenhower told us exactly who would do it.
The military-industrial complex.
Now, with the real forensic study of the evidence, we can all find out exactly what happened that day. And we can find some of the people responsible, considering they're still profiting from it 17 years later. I'm traveling to North Texas to make this documentary. I'll be exposing the truth movement for what they really are while interviewing researchers and traveling through Denison, Texas, where the father of the military-industrial complex was born.
Regardless of how you feel about the events of that day, it is the most important issue of the 21st century.
The technology's there that we wouldn't need the fossil fuel industry?
We would not, no, we do not need oil, gas, or coal, or nuclear power, or centralized utilities, and have not needed them for decades.
The best way to know this truth is by studying the physical evidence of that day. You see, energy is needed for everything. It's used for transportation and shipping, manufacturing companies, agriculture and farming. And we have some pretty disgusting ways of creating our energy. But like I said, we need it for everything. We need it to build a skyscraper. Whether it's manpower or heavy machinery, some type of energy is needed. And the same goes with demolishing a building. Whether it's heat, explosive, or some other kinetic force. Now, when a building is brought down, the debris pile left over is usually about 12% of the original building height. Not only that, but it creates a seismic impact that hits the ground and travels through the earth based on the mass of the original building. For example, the Seattle Kingdom was 250 feet tall. When they brought it down, it was 30 feet. This is 12%. The seismic reading was a 2.3 on the Richter scale. The Twin Towers were 110 stories each. This is approximately 1,360 feet. So you would expect 13 to 16 stories of debris left over on that day. The debris pile left over was 3 stories tall, virtually the same height as the lobby. Notice how the ambulance in this image is not crushed by steel and concrete, but instead it's covered in fine dust. And the seismic reading was pretty much the same as the Seattle Kingdom.
I mean, obviously we've looked at all of the seismic signals. The signals strength due to the collapse of the towers were not of any magnitude that was seismically significant from an earthquake design standpoint, or from the design or failure of a structural component, or of, I would say, a piping system that might be used in a structure. So there wasn't anything that gave us pause in terms of that being a significant seismic event.
So what does this mean? It means tons of steel and concrete did not hit the ground that day. It turned to dust, which you can actually see happening with your own eyes.
reason there's so little rubble is that all of it simply fell down into the ground and was pulverized, evaporated.
No, George, the reason there's so little rubble is it simply went up into the air and was inhaled by everybody.
A huge amount of paper and powdered concrete, or powdered whatever it was.
Powdered building.
Powdered building.
And everything in it.
That was covering Manhattan.
Converting much of the building's material into huge dust clouds of particles requires a large amount of energy. Much more energy than you could get from jet fuel or bombs, let alone a structural collapse. The truth is, an advanced weapon was used to destroy all 7 buildings that day. 9/11 was pulled off using black budget technologies. Secret weapons, so to speak.
Anything that can do what was done is classified technology.
Has the ability to direct energy in such a way to disrupt the molecular bonds.
If we put our heads in the sand and ignore the fact that that technology exists, you can guarantee it's going to be used again and again and again. This was a demonstration in front of the entire planet of this technology. And it is a horrendous technology that can destroy the planet. But that technology doesn't have to do what was done. It can do good things. Nikola Tesla wanted to give free energy to the world. He was afraid it might be used for evil purposes.
This technology did in fact fall into enemy hands, and it was used on September 11th, 2001.
That means we can use it for good without worrying about that risk, because it's already happened.
So I won't have enough time in this film to prove this to you, but you can prove it yourself just by studying the facts. Personally, I would start with Andrew Johnson's 2 books, 9/11 Finding the Truth and 9/11 Holding the Truth. You can get these for free on his website as a PDF, or you can purchase a hard copy on Amazon for about $13. I need to present a short summary of this evidence in order to make the case for these airplanes.
If they want the truth about what happened with the planes, surely they want the truth about what happened with the buildings.
The towers didn't burn up, nor did they slam to the ground. They turned into dust in midair.
Certain people on this planet have the ability to manipulate the structure of matter, down to an atomic, molecular, and even nuclear level. They can also affect the behavior of gravity. All of this is done without the use of heat, at least not the normal kind of heat that burns paper.
But there's transmutation.
No ionizing radiation or any other kinetic force, but instead manipulating what's known as the ether.
You can call it sorcery, you can call it alchemy, but I think it's all part of the same thing. It's a way of engineering or affecting the ether, this underlying fabric of our reality.
The all-pervasive sea of energy that life is maintained in.
To deny the ether is ultimately to assume that empty space has no physical qualities whatsoever. The fundamental facts of mechanics do not harmonize with this view. There exists an ether. Space without ether is unthinkable.
But this was replaced by the explosive age of nuclear power and petroleum oil, and Nikola Tesla was virtually written out of existence. In fact, even replaced.
To understand how Tesla's technology was weaponized, we have to understand 2 main points of Tesla's experiments and research. And that is his experiments in vibration and resonance and his experimentation with scalar wave technology.
Nikola Tesla demonstrated the importance of electrostatic fields, but he also understood how to utilize magnetic fields.
The Earth itself is a giant magnet. Researchers today believe that magnetism comes from currents in the liquid metals in the Earth's core.
There was a spike in the Earth's magnetic field for every event on 9/11.
The first one is WTC-1 getting an airplane-shaped hole.
It seems this would include the Pentagon event and Shanksville.
If you look at 10:03 to 10:06, which is 2 official times that they mention in the official story. But I also was able to plot the fluctuations in the magnetometer data. At 10:03 there's a fluctuation, and 10:06 is where it dips.
Let's look at the weather that day.
To the east in the country, no problems except down in Florida, a little rain. Northeast, we'll see little rough seas along the New England coastline from that hurricane that's going away. That hurricane.
There was a big hurricane on the morning of 9/11 just off the coast of New York.
When you look at the data for Hurricane Erin, this is clear evidence of weather modification, pointing out that Erin went in a straight line for 4 days towards New York City, and then it stopped 5 miles off the coast on 9/11, becoming the closest to the East Coast on that day and covering a wider area.
The wind speed, the air pressure, and the location were pretty much constant for 24 hours surrounding the events of 9/11. A controlled environment is what it looks like, but
There's a strong possibility the effects of the storm would have reached as far as Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Washington, D.C.
JFK Airport, LaGuardia, and Newark airports all reported thunder on 9/11.
So the fact that all of the events took place on the East Coast might actually be of huge significance.
That says there were field effects there.
Despite all of this, there was very minimal news coverage.
It is beautiful outside.
New York City, beautiful day.
Perfect September day.
This is a real cold front, folks. That means it's a boundary line of the very cool, dry air, and it is going to make its way well offshore, help to push Hurricane Erin up to the north. It's not going to affect us at all.
Rough seas still from the chop from that hurricane, but other than that, it's kind of quiet around the country. We like quiet. It's quiet. It's too quiet. Too quiet.
Because the water that had been real smooth in the day right beforehand had gotten real choppy with all the movement.
You see, hurricanes are very similar to Tesla coils in the sense they build up a static field.
Hurricane, it's like a giant Tesla coil. And it does indeed produce a static field around it.
Which is exactly what was happening in New York City the night before September 11th. Here's some stills from a video taken the night before 9/11. You can see a static field was present. I believe Hurricane Erin was a Category 3 by this point.
Here's the satellite radar picture showing the rain that moved offshore thanks to the cold front. And that cold front, it's a true cold front. This day is going to be beautiful, and it takes a while, really, for the cool and dry air to move in. So tomorrow morning should be a couple degrees cooler.
What could have created this strange cloud around the buildings? Was it Osama bin Laden? This is about 12 hours before the attacks.
Yeah, a little lightning out there too. Some good downpours. Not everyone received the rain yesterday. It was scattered, as we mentioned yesterday, but in a few cases it did really come down.
I've come to learn that dry air can act as a sort of capacitor. A capacitor holds an electric charge.
Nothing but dry skies.
Comfortably dry, cool, dry air mass move in overnight.
Very cool, dry air.
Dry weather all the way into the weekend.
Right now, the DoD's talking about using the spectrum as a warfare domain.
Can I ask you a question about some of the technology that you're developing to fight the war on terror, specifically directed energy and high-powered microwave technology? When do you envision that you can weaponize that type of technology?
Goodness. It is in, for the most part, the kinds of things you're talking about are in varying early stages.
There's hot directed energy weapon systems and there's cold ones.
Do you have anything you'd add?
I don't think I would add much. I think they are in early stages and probably not ready for employment.
Of things, when you invest in research and development and begin a developmental project, you don't have any intention or expectations that one would use it. On the other hand, the real world intervenes from time to time, and you reach in there and take something out that is still in a developmental stage, and you might use it.
It's gone. The Twin Trade Towers are fucking gone.
We have low heat, unburned paper, low seismic impact, minimal debris, bathtub survives. Material-specific effects, toasted cars at a distance, tritium without ionizing radiation. It doesn't have ionizing radiation. There's really only one thing that fits the bill.
It's gone. The Twin Trade Towers are fucking gone.
You sound like you're willing to experiment with it.
I think that's the point, and I think, and we have, I think, from the beginning of this conflict, I think General Franks has been very open to looking at new things if there are new things available, and has been willing to put them into the fight even before they've been fully wrung out. And I think that's not referring to these two particular cases of directed energy or high-powered microwave, but sure.
In 2007, there was a hearing to determine some of the illnesses caused during the Gulf War. According to the Veterans Affairs Committee, electromagnetic weapons were used, including high-powered microwaves, and the committee asked if some of these waves could have contributed to the illnesses. This took place in 1991. You see, these weapons have been around for quite some time now, and all of us are capable of understanding them.
Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry.
Maybe all of us, being confused together, can come up with answers to formulate a future that we can all enjoy.
You see, they've lied about everything. The war on terror, the so-called opioid crisis, the last 16 years of ongoing war in Afghanistan.
Every single bit of it is absolute, total crap.
Climate change, global warming. If any of these things were legitimate problems, we have the technology and the means to fix it, but they choose not to. Why?
A scientific, technological elite.
The corporations in charge of security rapidly responded to assist a number of their customers near Ground Zero in New York City and Washington, D.C. SAIC, or Leidos, are members of a club that we're not invited to. The Directed Energy Professional Society. This includes some very well-known government contractors, as well as some not-so-well-known contractors.
NIST produced 10,000 pages of technical reports about the destruction of the World Trade Center, right? Two companies that were involved in the production of those reports are Science Applications International Corporation and Applied Research Associates.
When Dr. Judy Wood filed her qui tam case against these corporations, she was suing them for taking American tax dollars and providing the government and the people with fraudulent science and inaccurate data. She filed with a signed affidavit from John Hutchison, pointing out the many conflicts of interest between the work of these companies and the nature of the destruction.
There is a very definite connection between what happened on 9/11 and what happened with John Hutchison's in John Hutchison's experiments. And again, it's to do with this underlying energy, some type of zero-point energy, some type of energy which is fundamental to the structure of matter.
known as the Hutchison effect.
That was one that is really highly controversial.
You know, we do know that people in the military are well aware of what you've been doing. You know, it's not as if you have been, working away totally as like a hermit. They're fully aware of what you've been doing.
The U.S. military took an interest.
Well, we did for a while.
Colonel John Alexander was 1983. He came with a team from Los Alamos.
And I had 4 guys from INSCOM, including myself, and 2 from Los Alamos.
So I gave a demonstration for about 4 months working with the team.
To recreate the situation, which they did with John Hutchison. They wrote a scathing report and actually suggested that Tom Bearden, local U.S. guy, had slipped into the country somehow and manipulated it. Had absolutely nothing to do with it. But that was enough to kill, as I couldn't get further funding out.
So John Alexander was a little upset over that, and he brought in another team from McDonnell Douglas to do a clear, not classified report.
But here's one where Jack Houck and McDonnell Douglas came along and supported it.
Then after that, of course, the Canadian government did their experiments and kept it a matter of national security.
The implications of this technology are so amazing, it could help every single person on this planet, but instead, it's been weaponized and classified.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
A lot of people have tried to explain away the impossible physics demonstrated by the aircraft that day.
Looks like it took a major hit. It did. It's a plane.
Most folks' common sense tells them jets can't do that.
The real airplane couldn't have sliced through a building.
There is no debate.
It was like a 767, like a dual engine, American Airlines. I saw it clear.
American Airlines?
An aluminum jet cannot slice through a steel skyscraper like a hot knife through butter.
With a steel facade, with reinforced concrete flooring, and 47 steel support beams.
And all of a sudden I saw this plane. It was right there.
There were no planes.
A jet's wing can't slice through a steel building.
It would appear to be a 737 jet plane.
They don't disappear into steel skyscrapers.
And this is one of many faked videos put out by the news media. In those faked videos,
CGI layered over live television.
How do you do it?
Computer-generated images.
Inserting a fake airplane into the video.
Of 117 witnesses.
Broadcasting fraudulent video.
Something went by and like fucking blew it. It sounds like a plane.
Everything about 9/11 is fake.
You saw a plane go in? A plane went straight into the building, right there into the side. Plane? Yes, up into the plane. Yeah. That was a direct hit. A huge one. There were 2 planes? Yeah. There's 2 on each building. Yeah, I saw the last one.
There's a CGI glitch.
An American Airlines jet hit the tower.
Can we really believe that the airplane would go completely inside?
I saw the plane from the sky pass right into it.
David Shaler, he was talking about no planes, and he managed to get on to Sky News broadcast.
So we can hand on heart say there is no evidence that Flight 11 went to the North Tower and Flight 175 went to the South Tower, because they didn't do that painstaking forensic work.
After that, David Shaler was then saying he was the new Messiah.
Because he did seem to change after he started talking about holograms, David Shaler.
He was cross-dressing.
Well, I would say to anybody, slow that video down and make your own conclusion about what is going on there.
According to every video in the public domain, no part of the jet fell off. Even the wingtips slid like butter into the tower.
Were the planes fake or were the videos fake?
The September Clues film, Simon Shack.
How did they fake that? Watch September Clues.
September Clues is a series of videos. The perpetrator, Simon Shack, cannot, however, explain away the many eyewitness accounts or how so many visuals of a plane hitting the South Tower got onto private camcorders. So he doesn't even try.
I've now come to see that that too was kind of a fairly elaborate disinformation operation.
Simon Shack also claimed this picture was photoshopped, claiming this was a black gash. He said they needed to fake it in order to make it appear more like a wing had penetrated the building.
It wasn't photoshopped in at all, it was some, maybe coming from a broken window, it was some fumes escaping, and the actual direction of the wind was taking the black fumes across, which dissipates and then more or less goes away.
Now, the other thing that Shack pointed out was what he terms the nose out clip, where the plane's nose seems to come out the other side of the building. Okay, it does look a little bit like a plane's nose, but it's nowhere near as convincing as Shack's. So,
It is not a plane nose, it is changing shape.
We also have this so-called fade to black. Now, if you pay close attention, you'll see line scans here on the screen. This indicates that it wasn't a fade to black, but it was actually an electrical disruption, because after it goes black, it comes back about 15 frames later with another line scan, possibly a transmission disruption. Not a fade to black.
Pavel Harbour, he claims that that's a re-edit of the Michael Hezekiah video, when really they are just two separate videos really.
If there were no planes, it must be explained how this shot was achieved.
Oh my shit! That's quite a clear video, wasn't it, Part Foreman? So how did he track that plane through the sky if there was no plane at all?
I was standing right there. I saw it, I heard it, I felt it, and it happened. There's no, I don't care what the controversy is. That's bullshit.
But you can't have it both ways. Either Sir Isaac Newton was wrong, or the eyewitnesses are.
And I looked up behind me and I saw this huge airplane crash into the side of the World Trade Center.
He's either lying or dreadfully misinformed.
I saw the plane just collided into the middle.
If there was nothing in the sky, then why are all three of these men in the nowadays footage looking up before the impact?
Here, I've isolated Joseph Pfeiffer, observing what was happening on the day his brother, Kevin Pfeiffer, died. No matter what anyone tells you, there were reliable eyewitnesses in New York on September the 11th, 2001.
These witnesses are very credible that saw some kind of an airplane image.
Heard a loud buzzing. I looked up. Plane's like maybe 100 feet up, went straight, or more than 100, and just crashed.
I do think people witnessed what looked like a plane in the sky.
Saw the second plane came in low, directly into the center of the second building, right through.
Second plane circled around the building, and then saw the building, just went straight into it.
You have this other character called Killtown.
He thinks the videos were faked in a different way.
I just saw the whole plane go right into it.
Holy
What we're led to believe is everybody's fabricated their videos.
It's like you're saying that what I saw, I didn't see. I saw a plane.
Holy shit! How the fuck are planes doing?
I saw what I saw, and I didn't alter anything.
Ordinary, regular, nice, everyday people. They're not part of a big conspiracy.
It looked like a plane rammed into the second building.
How are you going to control everybody in New York?
How could the perps control all the video?
Each camera conspirator must have been briefed with the exact time that the graphic plane would appear to impact the South Tower.
The complete impossibility of live TV fakery.
There's no way you control everyone in Manhattan with a camcorder.
You know, I actually spoke to this Jim Huey Brex. He heard what he thought to be a plane, and he saw what he thought to be a plane.
Now, I also had to email Chris Hopewell because truthers have decided to call his wife a liar due to this reaction in her footage.
You can hear a woman screaming, and the same woman appears to scream on more than one clip. Again, they may have added those for dramatic effect, but it doesn't prove video fakery.
He's right. All this is dramatic effect. It's called post-production. Chris Hopewell sold his footage to AP, and they used it for documentaries. And he's not the only one.
CNN went round buying the rights to everyone's video cameras. One guy was paid a whole year's salary to give the rights away from what he filmed.
But truthers use this as evidence to call the witnesses actors or liars. Now, Mark Conlin's done a great job of disproving this on his blog.
Despite this, some researchers, who I regard as disinformers, still cling to the notion that nothing visible appeared in the sky and plane images were cut and pasted into all of the videos after the events.
World Trade Center glass.
Once again, if there's nothing in the sky, then why are these people looking up before the impact?
Well, actually, when I was on the ferry, first when the second one hit that I took the picture of, and then way off to my left, I just heard this droning sound, and kind of looked over there, and it was this little bitty plane coming.
I believe the fact that Carmen Taylor captured this demon face in her photograph has helped for these people to promote video fakery and photoshopping. But the fact is, I've also captured the same demon face in multiple videos. You can play the Michael Herzakani video or the Jennifer Spell video and clearly see this demon face.
I never saw that till somebody told me.
If you're a genuine researcher and you're watching this film and you still believe in video fakery, please listen to all of the Jeffrey Hill phone calls and watch Richard D. Hall's video radar analysis, the 2016 update.
I built a three-dimensional model of the entire World Trade Center complex and the surrounding areas, and I was able to then overlay the video evidence on top of that 3D model. I could then compare every piece of video which captured the event with the official radar path.
Nico hoped.
Watch September Clues. It's all laid out over there. You know, it's bogus, Nico. No, it's not bogus. You are bogus.
Those who would promote parallax as if it were proof of fakery.
Now they're blocking the evidence on the unconventional path.
In this clip, for example, the alleged plane comes down from above. This one, it comes from the side. Yet SHAC is claiming that these are the same camera angles.
Parallax is simply an apparent difference of things when viewed from different camera positions.
Now, Richard D. Hall's film shows how parallax has been used again to promote the idea of different trajectories in the videos.
I was able to show the official flight path in Daniel R. Bower's report does match the video clips recorded on 9/11.
In other words, the objects do not move around, but rather there is a change in the camera position.
Where some plane paths appear to be horizontal and other ones seem to be coming down a very steep angle, and he concludes that they can't possibly be the same. Well, my video proves that they are the same.
The thing about Nico Hopt is he continued promoting September Clues, which obviously uses parallax to promote the idea of fakery, as shown by Eugene Debs.
By including parallax, Simon simply debunks his own video.
We had Ace Baker.
Faking the video. Yeah, so we got Ace Baker. He's quite a prominent figure.
We really need to be questioning this guy.
The plane appears to pass through steel columns and the steel and concrete floors, like a ghost. It doesn't twist, bend, slow down, break, or explode.
So you believe that's genuine and that it's extremely important to get closer to the truth of what really happened, which is why possibly there are other people who are trying to say, well, it's a fake video, basically. Right.
It's fake. It's not an amateur witness video. It's a fake. I've highlighted a building that's clearly behind the South World Trade Center tower. Flight 175's wing should appear in front of the building, not behind it. This is a layering CGI glitch.
If we draw the position of the dark brown building in the 3D model, we can see that the building is in fact in front of the towers. So it is perfectly correct for the plane's wing to disappear behind the building.
Many more lies have been put out about this footage. Mark Conlin has done a great job of setting the record straight. Visit mark-conlin.blogspot.com.
The video images were not the result of computer graphic forgery.
It would have been too difficult to put in a CGI plane into 26 videos to get it to precisely match up.
Look how the Evan Fairbanks footage shows the reflection of the airplane in a car windshield. Do you people really want me to believe that they CGI'd the reflection into a car windshield?
Video fakery is out of the question now.
So why was the video fakery story put out about the planes? Because the plane crashes didn't look like real plane crashes. They had to keep that covered up for as long as they could.
A missile is fired seconds before impact.
It is irrefutable that there is something attached to the bottom of this plane.
You could clearly see, the appendage on the bottom.
That there was a pod attached to the bottom of that aircraft.
It appeared to me that there was something on the under fuselage of that aircraft that did not belong there, at least not with a commercial airliner.
Al-Qaeda certainly couldn't have added this equipment at Logan International Airport.
This is Flight 175. The landing gear flap opens up when retracting and extending out, so they pass where the pod would have allegedly been located, and then they tuck inside the fuselage by the wing fairings, as you can see in this video. And again in this video. Also notice the logo on the tail.
Military aircraft.
Many others, such as Daniel Pless, would like us to believe that a military airplane hit the building with something attached to the bottom. But if you look closely, you can see the logo here. This is a commercial aircraft. And the so-called pod is just the wing fairings.
All the different photographic evidence that was produced by CNN and ABC, they all show this pod.
It surprises me that an expert pilot thinks this is a pod. And then we have the Northwood documents. The problem is that theory does not explain the impossible physics or the complete lack of collision in the videos.
I don't believe you could remote control an airplane the size of a 767-200 anyway, particularly to hit dead center.
Nothing conventional can explain this photograph. Does an airplane really leave the silhouette of an airplane? Even as a kid, I knew something was wrong with this image.
6-year-olds know about this.
Somebody asked me, is an egg going to just smash against the wall? You get that thing going fast enough, it'll put a hole in the wall.
No, it won't.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Professor Morgan Reynolds filed his key tam case at the same time as Dr. Judy Wood, pointing out the impossibility of physical airplane crashes.
Talking about this article that I wrote, Going in Search of Planes in New York City, that was actually written as a summary of the data that we put into Morgan Reynolds' court case.
Morgan filed this suit and it's 40 pages and he outlines everything that they got wrong.
Professor Morgan Reynolds filed his court case with a signed affidavit from ex-CIA pilot John Lear.
I filed an affidavit in 2008, this year, in support of the complaint and in opposition to the motion to dismiss. And basically what I testified is, number one, why the airplanes couldn't have traveled as fast as they did.
The first problem we have with Flight 175 is the speed. As its nose passes this red line, it is 2.97 seconds from the surface of the towers. And that is measured in the 3D model as 2,540 feet. That comes out at a speed of 583 miles an hour.
Which is 120 knots over the maximum safe speed of the airplane, which is 360 knots. It's totally impossible. It cannot happen.
The official speed is round about 583 miles an hour, and I've independently checked that.
Roughly 560 miles an hour at sea level. No, that's impossible. Like 100% impossible. 100% impossible. Yes, again, you need so much power to push yourself through that air, through that density of air. Now, you've got an aircraft that's optimized, so the engines have the right amount of horsepower for cruising at 30,000 feet at 500 plus miles an hour. To do that at ground level you need 6 times that amount of power. Those engines can't put out 6 times more power. So it cannot. Absolutely not. No. Under all circumstances, I'd say an absolute resounding no.
It's physically impossible to control an aircraft of that size and speed at such a low altitude.
Yeah, the engine will probably not be able to generate that much thrust at sea level.
Because if you think of the molecules of air, they're further apart.
When an aircraft descends, air pressure increases rapidly, directly increasing air density.
Okay, there's drag involved here.
Air pressure increases rapidly.
Molecules of air, they're further apart.
People will try and argue, oh, well, the plane was in a dive, that's why. No way.
This is not diving. It is in a descent.
There comes a point where the drag of the air overcomes the aerodynamics of the airplane.
So there's no way that it could be going 500 miles an hour at 700 feet altitude then?
Not a chance. It would be like a rocket.
So there's no way.
NIST, which issued a report in September, October of 2005, purporting to model and explain the aircraft impacts in both towers.
Each airplane, American Airlines, the North Tower, and United Airlines, the South Tower, hit. It was 2/5 of a second while they disappeared.
In my opinion, we are not seeing a 767 with fragile aluminium wings impacting on solid steel columns.
We also have the lack of any crash evidence in the footage.
Go to airdisaster.com and look at what plane crashes are really like.
And why there was no wreckage.
Now here's the thing about the wreckage. The video evidence clearly shows no signs of crumbling, breaking, or any collision with the building. We don't see any pieces coming off. We clearly see a building swallowing an airplane.
There was a panel of a fuselage that you see with 5 window shades.
Now tell me, how's it possible this fuselage survived and made it all the way over here when we clearly see it disappearing into a building in all of the videos?
The fuselage is a hollow aluminium tube and it's being completely swallowed by this steel building.
Supposed fuselage, this was a picture taken on the 25th of October 2001, I should say. It's actually not on this picture that was taken on the 13th. If you look at these pieces, you can actually match them up. This one ain't there. So it looks like that piece of fuselage has been planted on top of the building.
I hate to say evidence has been planted without proof, but we clearly see in this video the entire airplane being swallowed by the building, and later these buildings disappeared. So how do we get this fuselage? Just like all the other sites, we have a tiny fuselage with window shades. Professor Reynolds' court case had basically the same defendants as Dr. Judy Wood.
And we're talking about major companies here. Science Applications International Corporation, Applied Research.
I contacted Morgan, who allowed me to use his court case in this film.
All these companies right here are being sued, and what they're being sued for is accepting money for providing a government agency with fraudulent information.
And you can bet your ass the information is fraudulent. These corporations know damn well that an airplane wing cannot penetrate a building.
This is the impact and explosion effects branch, and we look at projectiles as they impact structures. We look at material properties and how they respond.
Why would they spend so much money on projectiles that actually can penetrate steel if all they needed to do was go down to the scrapyard and get them some aluminum? The reason is, this type of material does not penetrate steel. They know an airplane wing cannot do this. It cannot slice through a building. Some of them right there on their website state Newton's laws.
When a projectile encounters a target, interest shifts from the forces felt by the projectile to those felt by the target. The two are related, of course. The forces which the projectile exerts on the target, possibly damaging it, are mirror images of the forces which the target exerts on the projectile, slowing it down and probably damaging it as well.
The impacts themselves are one of the key factors which show you It couldn't have been a standard Boeing jet that did the damage.
I'm not ruling out the possibility that something solid hit the building, but it wasn't an airplane.
Sandia Laboratories had been working on holographic devices attached to aerial platforms that could be controlled.
Otherwise, it would have behaved like this.
Because an authority tells you to.
Even playing video games, if you fly that plane into a building, that plane explodes or the wings fall off, it doesn't disappear.
The building is going to chew this plane. The physics of this are impossible.
Was this part of a projection system to broadcast an image of a plane into the sky?
Yes, there was an object in the sky which looked like a plane.
Got the wing disappearing. It doesn't look real, but to me that is a real, genuine piece of video footage.
Right. Let's repeat that. The videos were real and the planes were to at least some degree fake.
And being there was an ongoing court case, I couldn't advertise, I couldn't talk about it. Yeah, the Court of Appeals said, yeah, the law applies to this case, but we're ignoring the law in order to dismiss the case. We went to the Supreme Court so we can say we did it all, and the Supreme Court doesn't have to hear the case, only if they feel like it. I first submitted the request for correction. That qualified me to file the Ketam case.
Yes.
And then was able to file the Ketam case. Okay, well that was cooking, then I started working on the book.
NIST, like most governmental agencies, relies upon contractors to do certain of its work. Who should be a prime contractor for doing an investigation of the destruction of a building? Well, that's an easy answer. You go to the companies that specialize in PSYOPs and in the development of directed energy weapons, because that is who they use.
Well, first and foremost, ARA has been a leader in technology and good engineering and good science. In explosive research and penetration dynamics, we are the go-to company.
But then you get into ARA and you start to see, wow, there's all kinds of things going on. You know, on one hand, there's people doing tornado research, hurricane research,
weapons effects,
space assets, air assets, ground assets.
There's absolutely no reason to believe that ARA did not know about Hurricane Erin. They have the study for World Trade Center 7, which they considered a progressive collapse, listed on their website. Of course, this study has no mention of this bus or what might have happened to it after the so-called collapse. This is listed under a section called Weapons Development, Testing, and Effects. Weapons,
SAIC is ready to respond.
It is the country's 9th largest federal contractor with 44,000 employees, over half of them with security clearances.
SAIC has received more government contracts than any other company in the country.
Despite the company's success on Wall Street, it has not delivered on some of its biggest projects, costing taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars.
Scrutiny of the company is unlikely because of its close ties with the government. The company's top ranks are filled with people who used to run the military, work for presidents and spy agencies. Case in point, Defense Secretary Robert Gates used to sit on SAIC's board. Punaro himself is a retired Marine Corps General Major and used to help run the Senate Armed Services Committee.
We do not apologize for the fact that we have subject matter experts that have had careers in government.
David Kay. You might remember Kay as the man who led the search for weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, first for the United Nations following the 1991 Gulf War, and again over a decade later for the Bush administration following the 2003 U.S. invasion. In the interim, Kay was a high-ranking official of SAIC. Kay made many appearances in the media, prior to the U.S. invasion, in which he insisted that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction and needed to be removed.
Saddam is in power and desires to maintain weapons of mass destruction.
Kay wasn't the only person associated with SAIC publicly supporting the push for war. You may also remember retired General Wayne Downing. He spent years on the SAIC board.
It's about taking that regime out.
Don Bartlett discovered that as an SAIC director, Downing had amassed tens of thousands of shares of SAIC stock. And in an interview, David Kay told Bartlett that he too had received shares in the company.
And so here you had two SAIC people with stock in the company, which would only go up with the war, urging war. And the average American citizen did not know this. Not a clue. The news media said nothing about it. Said nothing, not a clue.
David Kay later went before the Senate to admit his mistake.
It turns out we were all wrong, probably, in my judgment.
Kay called for an investigation into how the intelligence could have been so flawed.
Yeah, this guy called for the investigation.
And for his honesty, Kay was celebrated in the media.
So finally this evening, our person of the week. He has certainly made news this week, and he has done his country and the world a great public service.
And guess who they hired to do the investigation? Once again.
Among the outsiders chosen by the Bush administration to figure out what went wrong, 3 officials of SAIC. Although 9/11 was a tragedy for America, it was very, very good for defense contractors like SAIC.
In fact, one of the reasons that the FBI gave in 2001 for not knowing that 2 of the September 11th hijackers were living in San Diego was that its antiquated computer system wasn't set up to share information. But SAIC spent 3 years building a system that ultimately failed.
In the build-up to war in Iraq, the government awarded SAIC 7 contracts without competitive bidding. The contracts had a face value of over $100 million. But after budget overruns, SAIC would get far more.
After the 9/11 terrorist attacks, SAIC won a $280 million contract from the National Security Agency to create a new computer system that would organize the agency's worldwide surveillance of telephone and email communications.
This is a very powerful company.
Well, are you getting closer to who other perpetrators might be?
Now there's something else you should know about SAIC. There's a company called Quince Imaging. They specialize in 3D court projection. Founder is Scott Williams. Scott began his career when he was immediately thrown into high-end display analysis for defense contractor SAIC. He honed his industry knowledge to build displays and visual systems for top-secret underground command centers. He studied image size, contrast, ratio, brightness, color, etc. He worked there for 16 years. And then went on to become the founder of Quince Imaging. What's really interesting about Quince Imaging is 2 of the 3 founding fathers are longtime SAIC senior employees. Now Scott was a VP and a GM at SAIC, and Adrian was a chief engineer. In no way am I trying to implicate these men as being part of a conspiracy. All I'm doing is pointing out that this technology is not completely secret, and some people at this company did work on it. During this time, SAIC became the distributor of the world's brightest projector. Here's some links you can go to if you want to find some more information. This corporation is still profiting off the war on terror. 50,000 employees with security clearances and a revenue of $4.5 billion as of April 2018. Those are our tax dollars, by the way. And there are other companies within the Directed Energy Professional Society that also specialize in advanced optics and holography. Some of this ties back to a company called SPIE, S-P-I-E, also a member. It's now common knowledge that directed energy weapons exist. One major obstacle the military has is something they call blooming or turbulence. This is basically where the energy effect spreads out over a larger area than expected, sometimes causing plasma breakdown in the atmosphere. A common problem that's been overcome in lasers, but it can also show up in particle beam weapons and other energy research projects. While I was digging into this, I found out that this effect can show up in other places. Phase conjugation is a fascinating phenomenon that operates somewhat like holography, but it is a dynamic hologram whose holographic plate is defined by interfering wavefronts in a non-linear optical medium rather than etched as a static pattern on a glass plate, like this. This is a direct connection to field interference and wave interference, and what's known as holography or phase conjugation, but something much more advanced. In other words, the energy cover-up. Now, holography is just one of the many applications of lasers. And since a laser is made up of photons that's being directed, then technically, if a hologram is being used to deceive you, I would call this a directed energy weapon, so to speak. Most already know about this article from William Arkin, mainly because it was referenced in the Loose Change film. This article was full of information about covert operations and psychological warfare. What the Loose Change film was basically saying is,
the cell phone calls were fake. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Dylan Avery referenced this article in regards to the voice morphing technology developed at Los Alamos.
By taking just a 10-minute sample of somebody's voice, the scientists are able to create an almost perfect copy.
But Dylan stops at this page, and he doesn't take it any further. He goes on to talk about the hijackers. There was some very valuable information in this article, like the spaceborne holographic projector that's able to project a large three-dimensional object that appear to float in midair, or the fact that there's a classified super-secret program to develop the technology, and that the technology would be coming from space. Are we supposed to believe that Dylan Avery was too lazy to finish this article? Or is it possible he was trying to mislead us from this information in order to support his pod theory? Why would he not go all the way to the bottom of the page?
This is a page from a military manual. The holographic projector, three-dimensional visual images into a selected area, supports PSYOP and strategic deception management, and provides deception and cloaking against optical centers.
Now this inspired me to go check out a book from the local library here.
We have received a book in that you've requested a hold on, and it's ready for you to come pick up. Optical holography?
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. I'll be down there shortly.
Okay, you're welcome. Bye-bye.
I discussed some of my findings in an interview with Mark Conlon.
All right, we're here at the Denison Public Library to pick up my new book.
1971.
Right.
Optical holography, and one of the recording materials is gelatin, and it actually says gelatin is the most ideal recording material, at least back in that time, would create 100% diffraction.
That word just seems to crop up everywhere, doesn't it? I think it was a document I sent you, the IDI memorandum report.
Israeli
critical technology assessment.
Right, which was like an Israeli Air Force document from 1987, I believe.
And NATO, yeah, 1987. And there's several references in that to holographic technology and gelatin again. Mm-hmm. Now I find that quite fascinating, really. Ace Baker talks about gelatin.
They were called gelatin, and their art was called the bee thing. Nonsense. Gelatin were explosives experts installing a fake airplane crash.
Gelatin, is this some type of cryptic clue to telling you what technology was used, but like you said, in a sick way of using it as a disinfo for explosives?
So you think that there's certain people being put out deliberately to try and steer the argument down the path of fake video in order to distract from what may have really happened?
Yeah.
That's exactly what's going on here. I still see the story about the gelatin art students. These are the so-called Israeli explosives experts. And the fact that they're called Israeli is ridiculous. They're from Austria. This was a PSYOP set up by the Lower Manhattan Cultural Center and the New York Times, and it's still running today. And there were 2 different E-teams, but neither one of them are explosives experts. And neither is Gelatin. In August, I think it was the New York Times, has the, and it's still up on their website.
Yeah, 18th of August, just in time.
Right, and so now if you hear that story, you Google it.
It almost leads you up the wrong path, doesn't it, with the, explosives being used.
And it's pre-9/11, so obviously these Gelatin art students are part of a Zionist conspiracy, and they planted the bombs in the buildings and made the plane-shaped holes, and they faked all the videos, and problem solved. In no way am I trying to downplay the role Israel had in the attacks. All I'm doing is showing that the mainstream media would not give us true information. We should know this by now. The art students weren't even in the South Tower. But this story was put out in order to help promote fraud. It's still being used today. People are even calling the jumpers fake. I can't even believe I have to address this issue. Many witnesses saw people fall to their deaths. Plus, the people promoting this story cannot be trusted. They've had their own fair share of performance art.
We need you, Ace. We need you. I need you. The world needs you. These are temporary problems. Innovators in their field are frequently unappreciated. My God, Galileo was subjected to an inquisition, prosecuted by the church. Galileo, for God's sake.
I'm coming home.
I hope this is not for real.
Not only that, but he's a very creepy character. He tried to sabotage both Judy Wood and Morgan Reynolds' exposure of their court case. He works in post-production like I do. He worked for a company called Phoenician Entertainment. They were only around from '99 to 2002, and the films they put out were very telling as far as propaganda goes. When you look at the themes of some of these films, it's pretty obvious what they're promoting here. Mark Conlon and I also discussed this in our interview.
And they had some interesting themes to their films. That deals with hostages, hijackings, aeroplanes.
Ace Baker is a liar and he cannot be trusted.
Sonic Impact, and that's got a plane on the front of the cover. Air Rage, Submerge, they've all got planes. There's another one, I think looks like the buildings, something's happening to a building, but yeah, it just doesn't seem a coincidence.
Yeah, one of them's called Air Rage, and it's on it's on Amazon, and it's all about terrorists, hijackings, airplanes.
Contact Dallas Tower. I want to speak to the man in charge.
Ted, Flight 777. They're requesting to speak with you.
Me?
777 is under hostile control, so I suggest you pay very close attention.
State your name.
Any word from the FBI? They've been ordered to stand down. Inspector Quinn, National Security Agency. You're Bigelow? That's right. From now on, this is an NSA operation. Each and every one of you is subject to my orders.
Wait a minute. How do you even know the plane was hijacked?
Yeah, but they're cruising at 25,000 feet, boss. How do we get there? Flap our arms?
The Pentagon's been working with Skunk Works. They've modified an SR-71 spy plane to move in an attack force. It's equipped with a retractable docking tube.
Sounds tough.
I've seen simulations and I know the pilot.
10 seconds till lockout. Roger that, RW artist slave. 777.
It's in their manuals. It's called perception management.
They worked for Reality Check Studios, a software partner of Visart or Visit VIZRT. That stands for Visualization in Real Time or Visual Artist. It's a Norwegian company that creates content for production management and distribution tools for the digital media industry.
You may not be aware, but you've probably seen Vizart's work. They were the ones responsible for the holograms on CNN during the 2008 election. Remember they beamed Jessica Yellen on stage? Here's one of the engineers discussing the technology.
And lately, toward the election on CNN, we incorporated the hologram being generated by Stats, our partners, and it comes into the studio looking as if naturally it's part of the scenery.
Here's the Stats guy.
A technology that you saw at CNN on election night, and what it is it's a virtual hologram effect that we're able to show either in the real world or in a virtual set.
Here's Jessica Yellen explaining it live.
There are 35 high-definition cameras ringing me, in a ring around me. I'm in the center, and they shoot my body at different angles, and I'm told that transmits what looks like an entire body image back there to New York.
Interestingly, the feeds were apparently dumbed down to create an effect similar to a science fiction movie that viewers would be more comfortable with. Beamed into CNN studio in under a second, creating an almost lossless holographic feed, live. And Ace Baker knows all about this technology, but at the same time, he's producing a film about fake video.
The official airplane videos look fake.
And there's all kinds of other stuff that he made up.
He categorically says that it's the Gelatin art students that was they used to create the plane-shaped hole.
The efforts to cover up that, or discredit that conclusion about it being, a fake object rather than fake video.
We're talking about 3D image projection.
Yes, an image projection or holograms or holographic technology, and gelatin's right at the center of that.
While gelatin is ideal, photoconductive crystals are another recording material. Earlier in an interview I had with Andrew Johnson, I asked him if he knew anyone who spoke about this type of technology. He pointed me in the direction of Edgar Fouché.
When I was talking to Edgar Fouché, he told me about some of the stealth technology. He worked as a military contractor, and he worked in Area 51 actually, and he showed me the documents which essentially prove that, and he said that they used quasi-crystals, and he was talking about this back in 1998.
To this day, I'd be hard-pressed to explain to you the unique electrical, optical, and physical properties of quasi-crystals and why so much of the research is classified. Why is the U.S. Department of Energy and Ames Laboratory so vigorously pursuing research in quasi-crystals?
So the guy that was into them, who was quite a specialist, was a guy called Daniel Shechtman.
And in 1982, I have found a crystal, and then several crystals, that it had 5-fold rotational symmetry, which was forbidden by the paradigm, by the rules that the International Union of Crystallographers created.
Dan Shechtman is an Israeli national. In fact, he's a prominent figure in the political movement of Israel. In his early days, he worked for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. This is where they claim they took the remains from the Roswell crash back in 1947. And there are plenty of other secret military projects going on at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
And then it took 2 years to decipher.
In 1984, a paper was published which marked the discovery of quasi-crystals, 2 distinctly different metallic crystals joined symmetrically together.
The work, by the way, was done at National Bureau of Standards, NBS, in Washington, where I spent my sabbatical.
Now, in the 80s, this was called the National Bureau of Standards. Now, we call it the National Institute of Standards and Technology. I found papers that listed military applications, but if you're not a member of academia or military, then you can't read them, or you can pay $75 per PDF. So Dan Shechtman found these quasi-crystals while he was working at NIST during his sabbatical.
And lo and behold, this cannot be. It implies 5-fold rotational symmetry.
Something Ed Fouché had been talking about 13 years earlier.
I've discovered that classified research has shown that quasi-crystals are used for high-energy storage materials, metal matrix components, thermal barriers, exotic coatings, infrared sensors, high-power laser applications, and electromagnetics. By 1986, several top-secret advanced studies were going on funded by DARPA.
For a couple of years, I was alone. I was ridiculed. I was treated badly by my peers and my colleagues. This is something new. That person expelled me from his group. He said, "You are a disgrace to our group. I cannot." He was standing on stages and published papers saying that Danny Shechtman is talking nonsense.
And then I saw a presentation which was done in 2012 by somebody at Imperial College, and they were talking about quasicrystals and how you could set them up in a material and you could make this material have a negative refractive index, which he essentially showed that this could be used to project an image from a surface, you know, for stealth. That's essentially what he was talking about. I mean, how would Ed Fouché know that? He wasn't a physicist, he was a cryptographer, a technician.
If you can, you have to imagine these things repeating in 3 different dimensions.
I actually then later found that Daniel Shechtman won the Nobel Prize for Chemistry in 2011 for, guess what, his work in quasicrystals.
It seems Dan Shechtman might have done something to get himself in the know. Here's an image with him and none other than Benjamin Netanyahu. And he's demonstrating for him his 5-fold symmetry, which was forbidden by the paradigm. I found many other PDFs with keywords like 3-dimensional and holographic, and all this seems to tie back to a company called SPIE, S-P-I-E, and the Directed Energy Professional Society. I also found many patents relating to this technology.
So the contractors that NIST hired to investigate 9/11 not only specialize in directed energy weapons and psychological warfare, but they've also collectively worked on advanced projection technology. This shows a direct connection between the alleged airplanes and the energy cover-up that's pointed out in the Ketam case filed by Dr. Judy Wood.
Both Professor Reynolds and Dr. Wood's court case was dismissed, but the judge admitted to ignoring the law. So the system is basically rigged. Still, if the so-called truth movement wasn't suppressing this information, then maybe they could have gotten some media exposure and had a better chance.
I think it was January 22nd where they announced that they weren't going to hear the case. And early February 2010, Richard Gage, Stephen Jones, and so forth announced a worldwide press conference. That limited me from talking about it.
Yes, yeah.
Because it would be shut down immediately.
Why would they do that? Especially considering the many people who still demand a new investigation. Dr. Judy Wood did the investigation. If more of the public knew about it, maybe it wouldn't have been so easy for the judge to throw the case out.
If we had 1,000 people in the street out front, you would have had something different happen.
The architects and engineers group, that's what happened. If they brought
Yeah.
up your name, your research, the court case.
This is the founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. I recently interviewed Dr. Abraham Rodriguez, which you can find on my website. He's been right in the middle of the censorship by the truth movement. He also has a couple of videos exposing Richard Gage as the liar that he is.
I don't understand the seismic graphic data. I haven't studied it. I don't know. It's very confusing.
The truth movement is doing a good job keeping the truth moving. The fact is, these tax-free organizations that claim to be about truth have been ignoring a huge amount of evidence for the last 16 years, giving talks and making a lot of money. The truth movement won't even discuss the airplanes. The interesting thing is, a lot of people controlling the truth movement know all about this technology and they're actively trying to cover it up.
Give us your background, some of the publications you've written for.
Sure. Let's see, Los Alamos National Lab. The article is Cold Nuclear Fusion. Principal investigator for the Department of Energy.
Amazing. So you've headed up investigations for the government before.
Yeah. Well, I've been around the block a few times.
So Jones, I think, knew about all of those effects and was briefed on some of them as well, if he didn't already know. I'm pretty sure of that.
The cold fusion part of it. In fact, that was the title Paul Palmer and I gave to what we were doing, which is, we sometimes called it metal catalyzed fusion because the fusion occurs in metals. Fusion occurs in metals and metals and metals.
The connections that Jones has between the cold fusion experience that everybody can read about in Dr. Mallow's book, and with what's going on right now with the 9/11 situation, it's just a mirror image of him muddling up 9/11.
Eugene Mallow died. I didn't know that when I made my first film.
Oh, did you not? Oh, yeah. I became familiar with him and his work about a year before he died. I think they killed him basically because of Jones. Because I think that as soon as Jones came on the scene, Mallow would have smelled a rat. You know, he would have known. When Jones was talking about 9/11, Mallow would have known there was a connection between cold fusion and 9/11 straight away. He talked about it wasn't just thermite; it was thermate, which is where you add sulfur to the thermite, because he said that there was sulfidation of the steel.
It's a good question, but you know, there is an answer. The answer is with sulfur added.
So what I think why Jones said that was in case anybody detected this sulfur in the steel, and then they'd say, oh yeah, well that's the thermate.
And showed traces of sulfur, which is consistent with a byproduct of thermate.
No, it's not. That's more evidence of transmutation. What's rusting? It's oxidation. So what's oxidation? It's the addition of oxygen. And what does sulfidation mean? It means the addition of sulfur to the mixture. What's sulfur? Sulfur is a compound and the atomic number is 32. How do you get 32? Well, how about adding two 16s together? What's the atomic number for oxygen?
16?
16. So two oxygen molecules joining together and creating this sulfidation effect on the steel. We've got these charge clusters, which is in Dr. Wood's book. It's that Ken Shoulders talked about, and that is these charge clusters which produce the nuclear effects.
Are you telling me that this sucker is nuclear? No, this sucker's electrical.
You'll never hear this kind of stuff coming from the truth movement. They're way too busy promoting nanothermite or super thermite. He's spending all their time and energy trying to debunk these two people, who aren't hurting anybody. Just like the witnesses aren't hurting anybody, but that doesn't stop truthers from attacking them. We have people who say everything is fake, and they like to call people liars when they're the liars. The newest member of this club is Steve Dayak. And there's absolutely no point to ask these guys what happened at the Pentagon or in Shanksville. You might as well watch an episode of South Park.
Shot down all the witnesses in Flight 93 with an F-15 after blowing up the Pentagon with a cruise missile.
Some people just take the mainstream speculation and run with it.
Why would debris be located 6 miles away? Could it have blown that far away? Seems highly unlikely.
Now, we are not in the business of reporting rumors.
So it raises some questions. We don't want to over-speculate.
There has been a lot of speculation.
We don't want to speculate about this large debris field.
And again, it is speculation, not reliable, but information and speculation.
It certainly doesn't make sense.
You were the one who gave the direct order to shoot down a plane that you were told, as it turns out incorrectly, was headed for Washington.
Right. That's correct.
And when the flight got shot down by the happy hooligans out of North Dakota who refused stand-down order and shot it down with two AIM-9 Sidewinders, I have that from one top general and from pilots. This is vitally dangerous info, by the way, folks.
Thanks for that, Alex. Never mind all the eyewitnesses that saw an airplane.
I seen it go nosedive straight into the ground down here.
This plane may have been shot down.
The plane came right along this mid spot.
It may have been shot down.
And it just went nose straight into the ground.
It was going like this.
Saw the plane coming down at almost a 90-degree angle, maybe an 80-degree angle.
It flipped upside down at 10:03 p.m.
It was completely upside down is what it was. The tail fin was down, and it was going in at a sharp ascent, probably more than a 45-degree angle, closer to a 90-degree.
Here's another witness that's been called a liar.
If you Google my name, I come up as a total fraud.
She's become a target of bloggers who say the photograph is a fake. Val says that 9/11 conspiracists have harassed her with emails and phone calls. They believe Flight 93 was shot down as part of a government conspiracy and accuse Val of being part of it.
The shoot-down stories, I believe, are a distraction. There's no evidence for them.
My husband, it was his second day on the job, and he watched it come down.
It wasn't shot down or nothing. It's been said it was black. It's been said it was shot down and all this. He's the one that saw it come down. We just don't want bothered anymore.
Heard the plane and he looked up and he thought it was flying rather low, and then he watched it as it continued along the horizon right in front of him, and he said all of a sudden the plane just took a dive and apparently went down at about a 45-degree angle. The nose hit first.
Despite these testimonies, we have no evidence of an airplane crash. Actually, quite the opposite.
It looks like there's nothing there except for a hole in the ground.
Basically, that's right. The only thing you could see was a big gouge in the earth and some broken trees.
It looked like someone had gouged about a 10-foot wide, 10-foot deep trough through the strip mine area.
It looked like the plane had hit, but there's not a lot of evidence of the airplane.
I saw absolutely no signs that an airplane was present, no matter what direction I looked.
You didn't know that a plane had crashed there. You had a crater, and the initial crater was probably 15 feet deep, but we didn't have big plane parts laying everywhere.
So we got no plane parts, no people, but we got passports and box cutters. Oh, and a plane-shaped hole.
Could actually see the wings, outline of the wings and the main fuselage, the center of the plane, how it went down into ground.
We just have this silhouette of an airplane, like the Twin Towers. This unrealistic damage has led to much speculation.
The use of cruise missiles fits the damage evidence as well as the eyewitness testimony.
The people here in the area have reported that they saw a commercial airliner going overhead at about 2,000 to 3,000 feet.
As well as the eyewitness testimony.
With no landing gear down. They heard then a loud roar of an engine, at which point the jet climbed and then banked sharply to the left before going down straight on a 45-degree angle. Now, it hit the ground at that 45-degree angle.
But again, this official explanation gives us impossible physics. Airplanes do not behave this way. Even if somehow the airplane did nosedive into the ground, you would expect fuel to be found in the soil. Yet according to the DEP reports, we have no soil contamination. In other words, no jet fuel in the soil. Of course, a lot of this information has been taken off the internet. I've archived some links. So whether an airplane or a missile was used, you would expect some type of contamination. We also have the last official coordinates of Flight 93, putting the airplane 15 miles past the official crash site. If you do a Google search of Flight 93 landing, you'll get all kinds of stories and videos about it landing at Cleveland Airport. Mark Conlon and I believe this is a distraction. If you look at the previous FlightAware website, you get another story.
United 93, Newark Liberty International Airport to Reagan National Airport. Destination time from 8:43 a.m. to 10:28 a.m.
Obviously, they've tried very hard to get rid of this information as well.
They've changed it to what the 9/11 Commission report says.
But the timeline actually fits perfectly for a landing at Reagan Airport at 10:28. We have 4 to 7 minutes difference in the FlightAware landing time of Flight 93 at Reagan Airport. Bearing in mind the official story says the passengers stopped Flight 93 going to its target, which was the White House. Also, Camp David has been mentioned. Flight 93 officially goes off course at 8:56 over Cleveland, Ohio. So the theory that's put forward in Loose Change and other videos is that it landed at Cleveland Airport. But this conflicts with physical evidence. We also have this CNN report.
What's kind of odd about this one, Joey, is that at some point after flying past Pittsburgh, the pilot apparently radioed and changed his destination to DCA, which is Ronald Reagan National Airport. Ronald Reagan National Airport.
The entire timeline matches.
Destination time from 8:43 a.m. to 10:28 a.m.
Where's pilots for 9/11 Truth when you need them?
Dateline obtained radar data showing the path of United Flight 93.
So let's go through this timeline. We have it spotted at 8,000 feet by another aircraft. Then we have air traffic control reporting that it's flashing over Hagerstown. Then we have the last coordinates reported by air traffic control, putting it 15 miles past the official crash site, leaving just enough time for a 10:28 landing at Reagan International Airport. There was a suspicious aircraft reported approaching Washington Airport. I believe this was Flight 93.
And Michael, I've been told by our guest here, Michael Hirschman, who's the president of an international security and counterterrorism firm, that there's an unidentified aircraft approaching an airport in Northern Virginia, possibly Dulles or Washington National Airport. Authorities there are scrambling to find out about that aircraft. An unidentified aircraft circling and approaching an airport in Northern Virginia. We're not sure which airport that is. You have Dulles there, you have Reagan International, and George, actually those are the two airports there, scrambling to find out the nature of that aircraft. Can you tell us any more, Mr. Hirschman?
Only that's an unidentified aircraft approaching Northern Virginia.
Okay. What is it that that security can do at this point as they monitor that flight?
Well, my information, and of course all of this is unconfirmed. You can imagine the state of confusion right now. But my information is that they're scrambling jet fighters out of local military aircraft.
Michael, we'll come back to you in just a couple of moments. I hate to interrupt you.
Mark Conlon and I calculated the time, and it fits perfectly.
Pull up United 93. He's flashing at Hagerstown. Okay? I believe that you will hear about that plane shortly.
I'll take care of it.
Okay? No idea on destination and or altitude. We just put the routing in for a good guess.
Okay, I didn't.
Okay.
I did the United 93. Just a minute, let me try that again. United 93. Gotcha.
Got it. Thank you. Yes, what's going on?
United 93 has just been a reported altitude by another aircraft at about 8,000 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Right,
United.
Like I said, they tried to remove this evidence and have us believe this was not the result of any communication with the pilot. But that sounds very suspect.
By another aircraft at about 8,000 feet.
He's flashing at Hagerstown.
And thanks to the research of Mark Conlon, I now realize that it also conflicts with official radar data.
A new flight plan was filed from on board. Oh, not from on board. Filed from on board. Perhaps by a fourth hijacker, identified today as a pilot. Destination, Reagan International Airport.
Get back. You got another plane 20 miles out and they're evacuating everybody.
Hijack that's going in. That's what they said.
Report of another hijacked airplane coming in a minimum of 500 yards from the Pentagon.
We've all heard the claim of no plane at the Pentagon.
No plane crashed at the Pentagon.
I saw an airplane.
I saw it hit the building.
Yes, I saw the plane hit. I saw an airplane hit.
So with your own eyes, you can confirm it hit the Pentagon?
Absolutely. It slammed into the building.
The plane went into the Pentagon.
Right into the Pentagon. I saw it. It hit the building.
So you've seen it with your own eyes hit the Pentagon?
Yes, I did. The plane flew right over my head and hit the Pentagon.
Despite all these eyewitness testimonies, we have no evidence of a physical airplane crash anywhere. The grass is completely green and there's no airplane parts. Yet after the event, we have a line of people who seem to be searching for small parts. Yet they don't seem to be finding much. The same thing can be seen in the Shanksville site. There is no visible wreckage anywhere in any of the photographic or video evidence. But later, we get all this wreckage produced. A lot of the parts don't even match the alleged airplanes that were supposed to be used. The light poles knocked over at the Pentagon weren't even in line with the official flight path. Can't forget the fuselage at all the sites with the window shades. There's a long list of problems with this contrived event that I don't have time to go over, and I'm well aware of the flyover theory. Unfortunately, the Citizens Investigation Team left a lot of evidence out of their films, and it completely conflicts with eyewitness testimony.
It didn't fly over the Pentagon, it hit the freaking Pentagon.
Why is there no damage where the wings, or the vertical stabilizer, or the engines would have slammed into the building?
Honestly, I don't think there should be any wing damage. The wings should have broken off on the lawn. Now, we've already heard about all the inconsistencies in the damage at the Pentagon.
A hole big enough as 757.
But nobody talks about the damage to the roof, or how inconsistent this is with an airplane or a missile. I mean, why are these three spots so damaged? I also noticed that it was fuming from these areas. I spotted this in multiple videos. A lot of weird things going on. None of it points to an airplane crash. We also have the official records of Flight 77, never even taking off that day. I think the lack of airplane debris on the grass can easily be explained by this testimony.
The Pentagon sucked in the airplane, so we didn't see any more parts, or sucked in the airplane, so we didn't see any more parts or any pieces of the airplane.
We also have Susan McLuhan's testimony.
I shut off my radio, and that's when I knew there was no sound. And I said it out loud, I said it 2 times. Oh my God, it's gonna crash, it's gonna crash. It cleared those trees, so it, to my knowledge, it just seems to me it had to be below the power lines. Came in, swooped up, cleared those trees. It was fall, so it was full of leaves. No leaves moved on the trees. Nothing fell, because I kept thinking, you know, there should be like a disturbance.
We're supposed to believe that an airplane didn't cause any disturbance or leaves to fall off in September. It also had no sound.
And it just smoothly went around. I went right over there, banked to the right, and it just smoothly.
To me, these testimonies point to the conclusion of some sort of phantom airplane.
And I've described it a lot of times as basically a knife through hot butter.
Most people write off the testimony of Lily Leonardi.
When she initially arrived at the crash site, she told the Associated Press that, quote, "The biggest thing for me is that there were no bodies there. I'm used to crime scenes, but this one blew me out of the water. It just looked like the ground had swallowed up the plane. That's when I started seeing the shimmery lights," she said, "and it was kind of misty, and that's when I first saw the angels there. And I didn't say anything to the guys because you can imagine if I would have said I just saw angels on the crash site, they'd have called the office and they would have said she's lost her mind, tell her to go home." So Leonardi kept what she saw to herself for nearly 2 years. Then she finally told others, including her former FBI supervisor, Kenneth McCabe. "I believe her," McCabe told AP. "I know she believes 100% that's what she saw. I know she's a sane person, so I'm not going to discount what she says she saw."
This testimony reminded me of the white orbs that I spotted in multiple videos and photographs.
I've taken my camera out with me, and I mean, when I was in Temple Luxor in Egypt, I started getting some, you know, significant pictures of orbs, if you've come across orbs before. Energetic light balls. I mean, some people claim that they're reflections of dust, but
yeah,
you know, when you closely analyse them and you see the geometric patterns that are inside the, you know, some of the lights that you get on your photographs, they're pretty insane, really.
Mark has analyzed some of these photographs too. The orbs become really apparent in the Park Foreman footage. I thought this was something that only I looked into, and then I realized there was a website back in 2004 based off of work by Tom Bearden involving scalar wave theory. He talked about cloaking and stealth technology, and also the case of the mysterious white orbs. Unfortunately, this website is not what it used to be. Orbboard.com is now dedicated to building in Melbourne. I dug a little bit deeper into orbs and found out some quite interesting material. Orbs are created by flashes of light reflecting off of dust particles. Obviously, there were a large amount of dust particles in the air from the North Tower. Another thing I found interesting is when you're in a movie theater and you look up at the projector, you can see dust particles trapped in the beam. I haven't tested this, but I suspect if you took a disposable camera with the flash turned on and snapped a picture, then these artifacts would probably show up in your photograph. If anyone wants to try this, please email me the results. But I suspect these orbs were showing up on lower quality cameras due to the dust particles interacting with the projection technology. These white orbs should not be mistaken for the mysterious white airplanes. There was a mysterious white airplane at the Pentagon. The mainstream tried to tell us this was the Doomsday plane, but we have similar looking planes in New York City as well.
They saw a spherical object above their apartment in between the time when the two alleged strikes occurred. So maybe it's the same drone that's projected that image of the first plane, and then it's just gone round and it's done the next one. And then Andrew said it's had time to fly to the Pentagon.
Yeah, potentially it has, because if you look at the timescales and the speed it was flying at, it did have enough time to fly the
whatever it was.
Yeah, whatever it was.
And it seems we also have these same reports in Shanksville.
Said that she had seen a small plane. She believed it's to be something like a Learjet.
When we got there, there was a plane flying up above. And he was smart. He flew straight for the sun. So you couldn't look at it and see exactly what type of plane or if it was a fighter or what it was. But, you know, we caught a glimpse of it, and as he was swinging, he was basically traveling in the same direction as the plane.
The second plane looked similar to a C-130 transport plane. It flew directly above the American Airlines jet, as if to prevent two planes from appearing on radar, and it guided the jet toward the Pentagon. Just like the two mystery planes flying by when 175 hit the South Tower. They seemed to be almost guiding the airplane. Let's not forget, almost every single government agency was conducting an experiment, a simulation, or some type of training exercise that day. Some of these are very telling. I've documented all of them on my blog.
Is one of the doorways to looking at some other technology that was employed.
We also have the case of the missing wing, which shows up in numerous photos and videos. Mark Conlin's done a great study, and it should be noted that the sun plays a role and the backdrop. In some cases, it can appear that the wing or the tail section is disappearing on a real airplane. However, in the case of Flight 175, we can rule this out. Mark did a disappearing, reappearing wing study, which shows that this correlates in different videos from different angles, proving it couldn't be from the sun or the backdrop. I've also heard this was the result of video compression. Unfortunately, this shows up in HD quality footage. Most things in that time were filmed on tape. I've also heard the argument the wing is still visible. I would argue this does not look like a normal airplane wing. I've spoken to Richard D. Hall via email about this. If you look at this video, there's a building to the left of the screen which is very darkly lit. It's dark because the camera's pointed up towards the sky, which is bright, and the camera's used an auto exposure to reduce the brightness. In other words, it has increased the shutter speed. I suspect this camera was operating at a faster shutter speed and it caught the projection technology and mid-project, so to speak. In other words, during the time that the shutter was open, the plane was being drawn, but there was not enough time for the entire frame to be drawn in the short shutter speed. So the last part of the projection, i.e. the wing, has been missed. The plane was being drawn, but there wasn't enough time for the entire frame to be drawn. For example, a shutter speed of 60 means you're exposing each individual frame of your film for 1/60th of a second. A lot of people confuse their shutter speed with their frame rate. Frame rate is not the shutter speed. These are two different things. The frame rate is how many frames per second you're getting in your video, and the shutter speed is how long each frame is being exposed for. The white square will represent how long the shutter stays open per each of the 30 frames. As you can see, the shutter speed determines the amount of time that each frame is exposed for. But regardless of this, the frame rate does not change. Frame rate and shutter speed are two completely separate things. Your frame rate does not change with your shutter speed. Either way, we're still using 30 frames per second. In this example, the shutter speed is set to 400. Each frame is being exposed for 1/400th of a second. Because we're exposing each frame so briefly, there is minimal motion blur and you can make out the words on the t-shirt. You can also see the fan blade clearly. If we change this down to 1/30th of a second, the first thing you'll notice is it gets much brighter. So what you have to do is shrink the aperture, the size of the lens opening, so you can compensate for the extra light. So you can tell by looking at this dark brown building, they've had to compensate for the light as well, which was caused by a longer exposed image. After compensation, you'll notice that we have an image with the same brightness but much more motion blur. Because each frame is being exposed for a longer period of time, that means more movement is being captured in each frame of the video. You can really notice this when you slow the videos down. During the time that the shutter was open, the plane was being drawn, but there was not enough time for the entire frame to be drawn in the short shutter speed. So the last part of the projection, i.e. the wing, has been missed. I think this could easily explain why this image looks so strange, and why it showed up in other videos. This would also explain the need for the aircraft to travel so fast.
One other point about, the ball clip, the NBC clip, where whatever the object is comes down from the sky, perhaps that was the backdrop for that image was the water and the New York skyline, whereas most of the others, the backdrop was clear sky. So maybe, and this is pure speculation, I'm just thinking aloud here, maybe the projection system works better with a clear backdrop.
Right.
Which is why it didn't look as convincing as the others, perhaps.
I've had an interview with Norio Hayakawa. He was a very good friend of Gabe Valdez, who investigated many animal mutilations back in Dulce, New Mexico.
Which is part of Hickory Apache Indian Reservation in northern New Mexico.
People believe there's an underground base that's using holographic technology to project UFOs into the sky.
And this was confirmed by a friend of mine who was New Mexico State Patrol officer in charge of Dulce, New Mexico for many years. He came to the conclusion, just like I did, that companies like Sandia National Laboratories had been testing airborne holographic devices in a miniature style already in the early 1980s. Some form of holographic technology may have been used in the early 1980s at Dulce, New Mexico to stage a miniature form of Project Bluebeam using some kind of holographic devices and convincing the local population of alien scenario, and may have staged some kind of a fake alien scenario using this device and creating the illusion of appearance of flying saucers over the Archuleta Mesa and surrounding areas.
Andrew Johnson is the owner of CheckTheEvidence.com. He's written 2 books about 9/11 and done amazing research. After looking at the evidence, he agrees.
What was actually involved was some type of image projection technology. And I know that you've probably done more research in that area, because I know you've been talking to Mark, and this thing about gelatin had come up, hadn't it?
So I just found that whole gelatin and, the connection with, Ace Baker, just, explosives, and then you got the holographic technology. I think that's quite telling.
367 grams of water, 68 grams of gelatin, and 8 grams of ammonium dichromate. This is a lot of dichromate in gelatin and will yield a rather thick emulsion. If you do have access to a blue laser, you would want to make a rather thin emulsion, because then more light can penetrate the emulsion, giving you a brighter hologram.
Something else I found about gelatin. The CEO of the art group, his name is Leo Koenig. Koenig stands for king in German. I also found an article from 2001 with that company again, SPIE, written by a guy named Koenig about holography. But what I find really interesting is the German sculptor of this sphere. His name is Fritz Koenig. Now this sphere If you've done your research, you'll know it was not destroyed by steel and concrete. It actually returned to the site. When I see this sphere in the lobby that seems to be surrounded by other occult images, it sort of reminds me of the Sentinel in Arthur C. Clarke's book. I believe this book heavily influenced the film 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Most people who saw that movie did not understand from beginning to end what it was that they had experienced, but they knew that they had experienced something profound. That something had been communicated to the dark, deep recesses of their mind, which they did not understand.
So we have this monolith witnessing the attacks, built by the Millennium Hotel. Nothing too strange about that. But when you look at a screenshot of the old website, it says that the Hilton Hotel pays homage to Arthur C. Clarke's vision of the monolith in 2001: A Space Odyssey. But he also paid homage to them in his film. Once again, nothing too strange there, but why name it the Millennium? Was January 1st, 2001 the real beginning of the 21st century and the third millennium? The intelligent minority of this world thinks so.
That movie was a message to those initiates who were well versed in the symbology of an ancient religion that is practiced to this day in secret.
What I find really strange is this old comic book cover, which has an Egyptian character uppercutting the North Tower. The title of the comic book was Revenge of the Living Monolith. And when the North Tower is destroyed in reality, it reveals this monolith. From Winter Garden, after the North Tower is destroyed, what do we have left? This strange monolith.
Signifying that something was happening.
Now I have kind of jokingly speculated that Arthur C. Clarke was involved in building the World Trade Center. I don't know if this is actually true. As a matter of fact, if anyone knew anything, it was probably Stanley Kubrick. Remember my quote in the beginning? It was my friend Stanley Kubrick who chose the year to name our movie.
Tell us what Bill Cooper actually said about what he thought Kubrick was representing with this monolith.
It seems very symbolic, and we also have to remember that the Japanese architect who built the towers thought about Mecca when he was designing it. He even says officially he had Mecca in mind. One with knowledge can look and see the occult symbolism attached to this event.
This was the symbol of the mystery schools of the generative force of creation.
What's even stranger than all of it? On New Year's Day in 2001 in North Seattle, a strange monolith showed up. People had no clue what this was about, and then later it was stolen.
You might remember the
local
monolith
news report.
first appeared on New Year's Day, then disappeared, apparently stolen. Caleb Schraber, acting for a group called Some People, rescued it and got the Parks Department to agree to reinstall it.
There's a lot of people that have helped out. Some people, some other people, some parks people.
This time, it's not going anywhere. He wants to be known only as Honky the Clown, but he says his two friends originated the idea for the monolith about 2 months ago.
It's all dark and like ominous. It looks like a rectangle, and it looks like a black spaceship.
Monolith, obelisk, stone. All of these are significant symbols in the ancient mystery religions.
You also have to accept that you're dealing with an insidious intelligence, which is, as we would call it, it's evil, and it is always 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or more steps ahead of you.
Something else that creeps me out. Some of the handles that these so-called truthers use are very strange, like Yankee 451, reminded right away of Fahrenheit 451. Funny considering no paper burned that day. Then of course we have the Yankee group, and their logo is a chess piece, and particularly the knight. If you've done your research, you'll know the knight symbolizes psyops in the military. Does he also know that the Yankee research group and the 451 group teamed up? Is that why he calls himself Yankee 451? But what's strange is this truther musical that puts on this musical that mocks basically all the truthers. And they always promote his articles, even though he's spreading lies about hollow towers and fake videos, calling the witnesses actors. and he attacks almost every researcher that tries to collaborate with him. Except, of course, Jim Fetzer and his truther musical buddy. What's even weirder, Stephen Diak is an old musician. It's funny that the mysterious owner of Truther Musical thinks all the other truthers are full of it except for Steve Diak. Other strange truthers have used strange names like Ace Baker. Let's not forget who the real Alexander Baker is.
Sometimes I think that that's what the names are for, so that the operatives can find out who else is an operative because they've got a coded name.
Mark Devlin's mentioned in some of his work to do with consent.
Even though we would have been tricked into giving that consent by deception, as far as they see it, we haven't said no. One of the dark principles of their ideological tenets is that if you tell people what you're doing, even if it's telling them wordlessly through symbols or numbers, then you've somehow gotten their implied consent because they haven't said no. And to not say no is to tacitly say yes in their mentality.
9th and 11th respectively, connected to 9/11.
I knew the air in New York was dangerous, but I didn't know we were thinking of using it as a secret weapon.
Like an alchemical process.
You know, there's that dreadful word alchemy, which we mustn't use.
The destruction of minerals, the complete elimination of the formal nature of the forms of things is part of the alchemical procedure.
Maybe these Harry Potter stories have another purpose for coming into existence.
Using subtext and analogy to convey knowledge of sort of secret society, symbolism, and the mystery school teachings, that sort of thing. It very much ties into that, the association of symbols and that to secret knowledge and all that kind of thing.
Especially in light of the significant connections between Back to the Future and the free energy aspects of 9/11.
When those scientists in Utah claimed that they had figured out cold fusion.
Fleischmann and Pons spent over 5 years and $100,000 of their own money on cold fusion research in 1989. And the free energy aspects of Mr. Fusion were clearly established in the released film, meaning that they must have known about the research before the film came out and not after.
There's a book written in 1981 and it was called The Birth of Christ Recalculated. And he claims to have calculated the exact date of Jesus Christ's birthday based on celestial charts for that era. You know, he worked out that essentially Jesus Christ was born on September the 11th, 3 BC.
Rockefeller puppet Ronald Reagan even designated September 11, 1987 to be 911 Emergency Number Day, calling on the people of the United States to observe this day with appropriate ceremonies and activities.
The technology they used for 9/11 we've had for 30 years.
And you know what you mentioned there also about the technology, I think that's an important aspect to all of this.
What if the technology is used on a bigger scale?
Which is making things appear out of thin air.
For instance, you know the whole idea of Project Bluebeam? It was research that was released by Serge Monast in the 1990s. They were going to, you know, project massive imagery onto the upper ionosphere of the Earth to, you know, essentially recreate something on the scale of a biblical second coming or an alien invasion. So it's basically, you know, a false flag alien invasion, if you want to call it that. A false flag alien invasion.
The military do have secret departments and...
Oh, there's lots of secret technology out there that's been around for a very long time.
Again, another Arthur C. Clarke quote. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
It seems like magic. And that's the trouble. Conjurers and stage magicians can perform the same feats, often much more entertainingly. It seems like magic. So the problem for the scientist is to separate the trickery from the real thing.
Let's give the hologram theory the benefit of the doubt for a moment and pretend such technology might exist. That still leaves the question of what cut the plane-shaped hole.
And this is where it ties in with Dr. Wood's research, at least up to a point, is how the holes in the buildings were made.
The magnetometer data suggests that a directed energy weapon was used to create the wing-shaped holes in the buildings.
Right.
Been looking into the Pentagon and Shanksville.
So a couple of things about Shanksville and the Pentagon.
Pentagon and Shanksville, there is the same evidence if you look.
A little bit of evidence that's available.
But there's not nearly as much evidence.
The plane-shaped hole was made.
Talking about the holes.
The plane-shaped hole.
The hole was created in the tower.
Well, if it doesn't look like a jet crash, what does it look like?
An energy weapon.
Is advanced technology.
Strange effects.
Once you study what happened at the World Trade Center, then you look at the Pentagon site and you go, oh my gosh, it is the same thing.
From the magnetometer data, the spikes in that.
The planes didn't do it.
Magnetic electrogravitic nuclear reaction. Magnetic electrogravitic nuclear reaction.
He produces effects such as the jellification of metal turning to jelly, with almost little or no heat, or even cooling down in that process.
There was this blast of warm air. It wasn't hot.
And we've got a number of other supporting pieces of evidence, like, for example, Edna Sintron, who's one of the people that was standing in the hole, and she's holding onto this steel beam literally within an hour of when the hole came. So that means it can't have been hot.
If the fire was so intense and stuff like that, where this plane crashed supposedly, how people could be standing right in that hole?
Well, that's where they were. They were there because there was no other place to go. Well, listen, this photo speaks for itself.
They took a rat tail file, put it between two wooden boards, put it in there. It lit up just like, remember the old incandescent light bulbs? Sure. We have a wire across there, and just like that, it lights up. Got to the point the whole file, which is as big as my finger, just lit up and broke apart.
Split in two.
The interesting piece was, it had been white hot. They reached in and picked it up, and it was cold. They reached in and picked it up, and it was cold. It was cold. It was cold. It was cold. It was cold.
What is it, hot? Cold, damn cold.
He was using what are called electrostatic fields. And he interacts that with magnetic fields.
There's a fluctuation in the magnetometer data.
That's another thing which people don't really want to talk about.
We have spikes at 1003 as well as the 1006 seismic readings.
And microwaves from microwave generators.
The active denial system, which DARPA and a few other military subsidiaries, these companies have been working at, is something that's been around for a long time.
Active denial technology and future solid-state active denial technology system will produce a focused beam of directed energy to provide our troops a non-lethal option to stop, deter, and turn back suspicious individuals.
From RF generators, radio frequency generators.
Uses radio frequency millimeter waves at a frequency of 95 gigahertz.
It only penetrates 1/64 of an inch of your skin. Goes very shallow into where your nerve receptors are.
Most described it as feeling like a hot oven or grill being opened up.
Once you learn the effects of microwaves, you cannot ignore the behavior of the jumpers.
They want to live. They're hanging on to the building. This guy's hanging from one hand to 1 foot, taking his pants off. This guy has his shirt off. If the fire sprinklers came on, I'd be wet.
And sprinkler systems that were activated.
Good chance that their clothing was wet.
There was actually water running down the stairs with us. The pipes, I guess, burst.
Now, why would they want to take off wet clothing?
The electromagnetic radiation released by the active denial system is similar to the microwaves in your microwave oven, in that it causes the water molecules in the target to become excited and heat up.
Microwave is many times worse for wet clothing.
So we have evidence of microwave effects in New York City. Now, here's some images from the Pentagon. Warning, these are quite graphic. Now, when Mark Conlon sent me these pictures, it immediately took me back to a documentary I saw not too long ago. It's called Star Wars in Iraq. There were victims that seemed to have their skin burnt, but their clothing was completely untouched.
mutilations that not even doctors can explain.
Even paper still in their pocket. Despite this, their flesh was completely toasted. If you watch this documentary and make some comparisons, I think you'll agree with me. The victims at the Pentagon look the same, unburnt clothes. If you ask me, this is evidence of microwave technology. These are toasted people.
I dragged the guy out, his skin was hanging off. His skin was hanging off.
Let's not forget the toasted cars that were found in New York City. These toasted cars were also spotted at the Pentagon. If you look closely, you can see rusting. It looks like more evidence of transmutation. And how about that roof? This damage isn't consistent with an airplane or a missile. So what did create all the damage on 9/11 if not airplanes? Finding out the true cause of the airplane-shaped holes is important, as there's been many attempts to try to cover it up. Conspiracy Cuber has made a great video on YouTube about the damage evidence.
Steve Dack has said that at least a dozen missiles were fired at each tower.
So he starts out by saying that the first 8 columns are bent to the right, which is the opposite of what a plane should do. Absolutely correct, but that does not prove missile use.
No, it doesn't, and the missiles that Steve Dack claims were used weren't even in production yet. Here's a YouTube video with a comment from a guy who worked on the project. These were still on the drawing table in 2001, but the concerned grandpa continues with his crash test and to spread lies on the internet.
He frames the argument as if it's physical 767s versus JSAM missiles. How about look at the evidence first before coming up with an explanation?
Now take a look at these columns.
Missiles don't account for any of the strange things going on in this picture.
Neither missiles or airplanes would cause a spike in the Earth's magnetic field. Now when you look at the damage evidence, you can see that some of the columns are bent outwards and some are bent inwards. This rules out the possibility of explosives. Plus we have people standing in the hole.
This directional damage also puts an end to the hologram theory.
As you can see, people are associating explosives with holograms. Is it really so outrageous to think that the same mechanism which turned the buildings to dust is the same mechanism that created this airplane damage?
When you examine the beams more closely, you'll discover that the warping and pinching shows remarkable similarities to the Hutchison effect and other strange energy-related phenomena.
Indeed, I asked Mark Conlon the very same question. Do you think the damage resembles the Hutchison effect? He agreed and made these comparisons. Now, upon closer inspection, Conspiracy Cuber pointed out these 2 columns in the middle, which look like they're being peeled apart. He points out this damage couldn't have been the result of an airplane or a missile. It looks very strange.
And bent in the opposite direction of what we should expect if a plane had hit the building. Why are they bent?
Bending and fracturing of metal.
It takes thousands of degrees to bend steel like this.
Typically you'd have buckling and tearing on the tension side, but there's no buckling.
I found it hard to believe that it actually bent because of the size of it and how there's no cracks in the iron. Yeah. It bent without almost a single crack in it.
And it seems when I do an experiment like I did for National Geographic TV and film, I blew out the elevator.
All of a sudden the elevator blew up?
One of the elevators, I think, came crashing.
A fireball came flying out, I guess from the elevator shaft.
The elevators.
The elevator doors, he said to me, blew open.
Bottom elevator, the glass just flamed, exploded out the front of the World Trade Center.
So they couldn't get their equipment down after the experiment, and just recently, for Fox TV is doing an experiment, and then some plumbing exploded downstairs.
There was actually water running down the stairs with us. The pipes, I guess, burst.
We had PVC that literally was pulverized and disappeared.
The mayor of this city came here, and he's giving reports of concrete cracking up.
Yeah, talk about a rough ride this morning. Let's go down to 1 and 9 and show you what we mean. Check out this huge hole in the road. A partial road collapse happened here sometime overnight. As a result, 1 and 9 northbound completely shut down right here at 86th Street. And as you can see, only one lane southbound getting by. This is a road that people use to get to the Lincoln Tunnel. You're going to want to find some local roads to get around this mess. Workers are on the scene trying to fill in the hole or perhaps just find out why this happened. We pulled up on the scene maybe 20 minutes ago, and there's no telling how long it's going to get this fixed this morning. I'm April Monica reporting live at Chopper 4. Back to you in the studio.
Reports of concrete cracking up, backing up, backing up, backing up, backing up. When I was doing the McDonnell Douglas experiments, we had a water main explode out in the street.
I remember an explosion. At that point, I got knocked out. I don't remember anything. Then I got up, and I looked out the window because the windows exploded, and the street below caved in.
And the crystalline structures are always changing very fast, and the magnetic properties are changing extremely fast. When I basically shut down the power, these samples, which are many of them, tend to alter. And when I switch off the equipment, sometimes there's metal samples that have been analyzed by the Max Planck Institute that seem to be accelerated in time, ahead in time.
Ace Baker loves to speak goofy and ask questions like,
what could possibly have caused that?
While never actually addressing it himself.
Each plane made a bright flash just as it impacted the tower. It can't be any sort of static electricity charge. The nose of the aircraft is plastic. What were those flashes?
Let's explore the possibility of a real airplane. As you can see in this footage, there's also a flash produced. But if you look here at this frame, some of the nose is already penetrated, and we don't see the flash yet. Next frame, we see the flash. Again from this angle, some of the jet nose is already penetrated. Then on the next frame, we see a flash. It's not what we see occurring in the Flight 175 videos. We see the flash before the impact. Again, Mark Conlon and I have made some comparisons between the Hutchison effect and the flash produced that day. We've been asking whether this could have been the initiation of an energy process. This doesn't only show up in the Hutchison effect. Ken Shoulders talked about the disruption of molecular bonds appearing like melting. We have a common pattern. I think the best term to use here is luminance without heat.
If you remember earlier, we discussed blooming, or what's known as turbulence. Here is a naval instructor discussing it with his students.
It kind of stays pretty close together throughout the engagement scenario. And then there's also scenarios where it's going to start to break up and our radiance on target is going to decrease. Kind of goes through this divergent line, just starts to spread. And so you can see the effects of thermal blooming. Turbulence is also going to cause the beam to wander or break apart. So that's going to decrease our it's going to decrease the irradiance on target, which is what we don't want, don't want.
Are these the same unwanted effects that showed up in the Hutchison experiments?
I've been through a lot of mischief.
He got kicked out of his apartment because he was interfering. Remember, the television went, through the air in those days.
The neighbors were complaining.
Yeah.
Notice here synced perfectly with the Hezarkhani footage, Evan Fairbanks' footage can be seen matching to the right, and as the alleged airplane enters the tower, the Burger King in the left of the shot appears to have a power outage. Now you could say the plane crash was causing a transmission glitch, but the thing is, clearly the antenna for the transmitter is on the north tower, which has already been struck. So why would striking the south tower cause a problem? This footage gives us some insight to this. Pay close attention. You can clearly see as the south towers hit, something happens to the north tower. Is this the same thing that caused the power outage in the Burger King? Similar to the blackout in the famous Chopper 5 footage, was this caused by some sort of electrical disruption?
We have electrical problems going on as well.
Some type of interference was taking place here. Could this be the blooming effects that we discussed earlier? Also, people have claimed the live footage has a delay. That's a lie.
And, to fight it from it. If you're taking a look now, you can see that we've just had...
The Luke Korchesny video also has some very strange anomalies. What looks like video disruptions. If you do a frame by frame of this footage, there are these purple colored line scans. In some cases they're rainbow colored. And you can really see them right before the alleged plane disappears into the building. I was able to find out a little bit about this shot. It was filmed on a Beta SP. I actually worked with some Beta SPs at my former job. They're a sort of magnetic tape, which was probably the norm back in 2001. This should probably be taken into consideration considering the spikes in the Earth's magnetic field. Earlier we talked about a theory regarding the vanishing wing. During the time that the shutter was open, the plane was being drawn, but there was not enough time for the entire frame to be drawn in the short shutter speed. Let's talk about another theory regarding magnetism. We have to remember that the dust here could have played a role in the lighting of this brown building. So I sort of have another theory as to why the wing could have disappeared, just to expand on the other. If you remember, earlier in the film I checked out a book called Optical Holography. Though I wasn't able to read the entire book, I read about 2/3 of it. I shared a lot of this information with other researchers. I'm still editing the interviews, which is quite a long process. Holograms recorded in these materials are stable at room temperature, yet they can be erased in one case by elevated temperature and in another case by an applied magnetic field. So I think this could possibly explain why the wing disappeared. This book is talking about a hologram being erased or faded if it comes into contact with an applied magnetic field. So is it possible that the higher quality cameras played a role in making the wing disappear due to the effects in the Earth's magnetic field?
I just asked if anybody had a computer, had a phone, or had anything, because so much of the power was down. People's cell phones weren't even working.
This is one of the reasons I believe field interference was used to create the damage, since wind to airplane crashes cause a town to have a power outage.
So whenever it crashed, all the electricity was out.
All the telephones, we didn't have no lights until 10 o'clock at night. We were standing in the office and the lights flickered and everything. And
yeah, they said the phones were down in the Somerset area.
You know, we also have this unburned grass and unburned paper right next to the crater. And it extends all the way out and it's not burned at all. You would think surely paper would be destroyed before any human remains or metal plane parts, yet paper seems to be the one thing that survived the crash. What I think is even more interesting is the fact that some of this was rising about 200 feet in the air. It looks like we have more evidence of levitation effects, just like New York City.
It's felt like an earthquake. It felt like the house was moving.
Lift, levitation and disintegration.
And it picked me up and threw me up against the wall of the building I was. You were picked up off the ground. Physically picked up off the ground.
I feel that I discovered an energy that influences the pulling effect of gravity.
Here it comes. I'm getting behind a car.
It was almost being picked up by a tornado. And just picked me up and tossed me about a block.
So if samples will fly up in the air, things even have disappeared. Transmutation, which is one element changing into another, one metal changing into another.
They showed me had a crankshaft and had exposed to it. They took it to BC Hydro for testing. And the same piece of metal on one end is case hardened steel, on the other end is, soft as lead. and it just from being exposed to things.
Fusing of dissimilar material.
Here's the famous knife in stainless.
When you study materials, you'll see that certain materials have a lower boiling point than others, making it impossible for heat to be the cause of these things fusing together.
Fuming of samples, but it's not necessarily smoke that's coming off.
Get it. Oh, goodness, what the hell?
So we have this fuming at the World Trade Center. We also have it at the Shanksville site. If you compare these two pictures, this fuming in New York City is very similar to the fuming at the Shanksville site. Mark and I are both convinced this is from a similar effect. You can see trees fuming even though they're not on fire and they don't appear to be burnt. More strange fumes here. You can see a strong haze in the air.
What is this haze? No point source, it's just hanging around there.
Finding these electrical problems as well, which is similar to what we have at the World Trade Center.
More strange fumes here.
And the other thing was to do with this, what they call blooming, it's like an overspill, which happened with the trees.
We have some strange damaged trees here.
Some strange things happened in that section by the trees.
We also have this cottage property that was totally in ruins. More strange fumes here. We have a group of trees here that are fuming, yet if you look closely at the picture and check out some other photographs, there appears to be absolutely nothing wrong with these trees, yet earlier they were fuming. Mark Conlon and I also found this mysterious fumes right off of Interstate 71 on 9/11.
Turbulence is also going to cause the beam to wander or break apart.
Okay, let's talk about the damage to the cottage.
You can see the effects of thermal blooming.
Every window, door of the cottage had been blown off and obliterated. The ceiling and the floor tiles had been blasted loose. That the garage left and came back inside out and upside down. And this is the craziest part, the refrigerator was twisted backwards and shoved away from the wall. The official report was that it was left structurally unsound, shifting it 1.5 inches off of the foundation.
He was interfering.
The neighbors were complaining.
More evidence of levitation effects.
The explosion shook the house clear over here.
We have electrical problems going on as well.
So we have this violent fuming at all 3 locations. Mark Collins pointed out that there are 2 different colored fumes away from the impact zone. They also continued to spray this area down with water well after the alleged fires had been put out. They were still spraying New York City 7 years later, and the violent fumes resemble the same as World Trade Center site. The concerned grandpa claims this was a military-grade smoke machine. They would have had to have these machines at all 3 locations, and in New York City keep it turned on for 99 days.
White smoke for 100 days. Makes you really wonder.
This was not smoke. The continuing emission of aerosols has been well documented. It's been determined that the ongoing source of this fuming was the World Trade Center debris pile itself.
And it went up and continued going up for months and years.
Is that why we had sanitation? Is this why they were pouring dirt all over the pile?
Now let's look at some of the samples that were collected from the WTC. There was tritium there. What was measured at the World Trade Center was definitely above background levels.
Iron-rich microspheres in the World Trade Center dust. They'd said that this was a fingerprint of thermite, so they were saying that these spheres were caused by thermite or nanothermite.
Thermite, the observation of these iron-bearing spheres, tiny spheres in the dust in abundance.
But I'd also been aware at that point that Stephen E. Jones was involved in cold fusion research in the 1980s.
1989, when this physics panel voted, Stephen E. Jones was running that panel, or
yes, he led the vote.
He led the vote.
Yes.
Let's discuss the iron found in the dust.
Organic material was also found, which shows it was not from a high temperature process.
There was just as much zinc as there was iron in the World Trade Center dust. Dr. Judy Wood has pointed out the fact that the boiling point for zinc is much lower than iron. So we have apparent evidence of high heat, and at the same time, no evidence of heat.
So we got these iron-rich microspheres in the World Trade Center dust, and I'd heard about these elsewhere. It's been found in the soil underneath where a crop circle had formed. And I looked at this research by W.C. Levengood. Looking at the pictures there and looking at the dimensions of these spheres, they were of the same dimensions as the spheres that were mentioned in the Stephen E. Jones paper, and that it was in the order of 10 to 40 microns in diameter. That's less than the width of a human hair, very tiny.
Basically the same size as the spheres found at the World Trade Center.
What were these doing in crop circles? And as W.C. Levengood observed, these were magnetized, and he said that they seemed to have been formed in the presence of a strong magnetic field.
A lot of folks say a nuke was used on 9/11. Well, there wasn't the ionizing radiation, but there was transmutation.
For these transmutational results, the metal forming another metal.
We had these iron spheres on the Tunguska River, another mysterious energy phenomena.
On June 30th, 1908, a remote area of Siberia known as Tunguska is devastated by a mysterious force 2,000 times greater than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. It left no crater or residue.
These iron-rich particles are definitely magnetic. They were formed in a magnetic field, similar to the crop circles. So we have these iron spheres at the World Trade Center, and we also have magnetized iron spheres found in crop circles. It seems Stephen E. Jones knows what to cover up here. Some people think all crop circles are made with planks of wood, but if you do a bit of digging, you'll find this is not true. There are some considered authentic or non-man-made. If you want to learn more about this, watch Richard D. Hall's film, Crop Circles: The Hidden Truth.
The possibility of crystal growth seems remote. The degree of pressure known to be involved in causing crystal growth in sedimentary deposits would have, had it been present, completely obliterated the plants. And the 600 to 800 centigrade temperatures over a period of several hours known to be necessary to promote such crystal growth in the laboratory would have, in the crop circle field, incinerated any plant present. Additionally, the very brief bursts of possibly intense microwave radiation thought to be the cause of node elongation and the creation of expulsion cavities through the heating and expansion of the internal stem moisture could not account for crystal growth.
And what's being explained here is an apparent appearance of high heat, but at the same time, no real evidence of high heat. In other words, the crops would have been obliterated from heat if heat caused the crystal growth.
I've been levitated off the ground in a crop circle, much to my amazement, which still baffles me to this day. I never would have exchanged.
How high up did you go? Just a few inches, or did you go way up there?
I have no idea to this day.
And it picked me up and threw me up against the wall of the building I was. You were picked up off the ground. Physically picked up off the ground.
So we have these levitation effects on 9/11, and we also have them in certain crop circles, the ones that are considered non-man-made. I find this statement by Nick Pope very telling. I had to refute the bizarre idea that the formations were caused by the testing of space-based laser or directed energy weapons, and dispel suggestions that the media coverage of the issue had been stifled by the use of D-notices. D-notices are basically something the media uses to get rid of a story that breaks the Official Secrecy Act.
I walked into this crop circle, and the energy in the crop circle was magnificent.
He has found that the formations which he believes to be man-made produce nothing more than background radiation. However, on 2 separate occasions, David has measured effects on his Geiger counter in non-man-made circles. In this case, David's meter reads 18 times higher than the normal background level. David telephoned the National Radiological Board headquarters from the crop circle and spoke to an instrumentation expert. He believes that the effect on the meter was not caused by dangerous particle or ionizing radiation, and the cause was probably electromagnetic in nature. Soil is made of 50 to 200 parts per million of iron. We have iron in soil. We also have in fertilizers up to 20% of some fertilizers are iron, and 5% of the Earth's crust is made of iron. So you would have iron in the ground that possibly, if some phenomenon was applied to that ground, could form tiny spherical balls of iron.
As soon as I learned this, I immediately thought about the soil in Shanksville and the fact that it didn't have any jet fuel contamination. So I decided to do a bit of digging. And it turns out it was contaminated with something else. Of course, this has been blamed on the old minefield where the plane crashed. Nevertheless, the links here are extraordinary.
Flight 93's fuselage fell near a closed underground mine that was filled with water, contaminated with iron and manganese that was leaking into surrounding areas. The company had already installed both passive and active cleaning systems, but there were problems.
It seems the water helps to hide the residual energy effects.
To fulfill those conflicting needs took more than a year of study, which determined 2 things. The site would benefit from enhancing the pumping system by directing the mine water against rocks. The resulting aeration helps break the polluting iron away from the water and allows it to settle. But something else was needed.
Well, we sampled the water for a year, figured out that additional ponds were not going to do the job, and what we had to do is create a wetland environment.
So they installed this pump well, which also made me think, where have I seen this before? We have the same sort of pump well in New York City that pumps thousands of gallons of water per minute non-stop. Going down this endless black cube.
Take care of this pump well water that is currently coming out down at the memorial and creating a pollutional problem at the impact site.
I wondered if they built a water feature at the Pentagon also, so I did a bit more digging. And guess what? Same thing here. If you look, you'll notice there's also been a lot of trees planted.
Plants do a great job at making the iron stick to the plants and remove itself from the water.
It's also possible that the energy is affecting the trees and plants themselves. If you take a look at the trees in Shanksville, even in 2009 they didn't fully grow back. And if you look at them today, they still look kind of strange to me.
The cleaner water will be sufficiently pure to use in the memorial's rest areas and also for irrigation needs at the nearby tree planting and mine reclamation projects.
I suspect that these pump wells and filtration systems were actually built to cover up the energy effects.
And also at the World Trade Center site itself, some areas of the site continue to be hosed down 7 years after the events.
It seems like the plants and the trees could also be helping with this effect.
Plants do a great job at making the iron stick to the plants and remove itself from the water.
I can't fully prove it, but I suspect the iron that's contaminating these systems are the same as these iron microspheres. Of course, it's a lot harder to find information about the Pentagon's water system.
There's actually no doubt in my mind that there's energy effects at Shanksville.
Suddenly, in front of me was a tube running up about 1,000 feet. Oh, well, I'm not a good judge, but I would say 1,000 feet plus, or coming down out of sight onto the ground. It was to the left, about halfway along the wood line that you can probably see on the film. The first one, where I stood in the field nearby, and then when that died away, the second one appeared near the tree over near the woods. This was not very many yards away from me, but the important point about it that struck me with it was the circular motion of the ashes in the grit on the ground. It didn't appear to be being sucked up the tube, it was just rotating at a high speed on the ground, about 2 feet wide, 2 feet 6 perhaps on the ground.
All right, Andrew, so the farmer's actually describing some rotation in these black tubes. If those tubes were something to do with crop circle formation, so maybe this is an example of early testing of something that has been applied to create crop circles. You know, let's go a step further and spell out what we're saying here, and that is that through the 1990s there may have been testing of energy-based technologies which can be focused and cause changes in matter and things on the ground that were being tested that was similar to something that was used on 9/11. And really there's only one place where I think, my view, where that would be, which is on a platform in space in orbit around the Earth.
Yeah, I mean that's where, you know, the logical place where it would be. We have the site. A lot of people have tried to kind of ridicule this idea of having space-borne technology doing things on the ground, and this is something that, of course, Dr. Wood has been lambasted for, even though she's never actually said that she knows that the weapon is in space. You know, we don't know where it is. For example, for the World Trade Center, we don't have any witness accounts describing, you know, 2.5 foot thick black beams coming down from the sky. To my knowledge, I've never read such accounts, so we don't know if it's any relation to what this farmer witnessed.
Can I just interject there, Andrew? There was 24-foot diameter circular holes
Correct.
in some of the buildings, yeah?
Correct. It is true, as we were saying earlier, that they did. Ronald Reagan announced in the 1980s this SDI program, the Strategic Defense Initiative, where he was going to build this space-borne peace shield which would protect the United States against the Russian intercontinental ballistic missiles, the ICBMs, and all of that propaganda that went along with it. And that was a heavily funded defense program, and as seems to be the case with these programs, there's a proportion of that money that gets siphoned off into black, unacknowledged special access programs, USAPs as they've sometimes been called. So what did they develop in those programs? Obviously we don't know, we don't have access to that information, you know, we can only speculate.
The Air Force contracted for an experimental unmanned plane equipped with solar power to carry kinetic kill vehicles that would intercept and destroy ICBMs by colliding with them. In theory, the unmanned plane would destroy ICBMs in their boost or mid-course trajectory after they were launched from the Soviet Union. The Air Force also experimented with space-based lasers, particle beams, and other exotic methods for space-based missile defenses.
The Bear test, launched on July 13, 1989, was the first successful operation of a directed energy weapon in space. It proved that directed energy can be reliably operated in space.
To waste these dollars on a space-based weapon system, and they're all lies.
The same guy who put weapons in space is the same guy who gave this speech at the UN.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
Going into the Project Bluebeam stuff, have they got the technology to do this?
I got in touch with a Canadian journalist by the name of Serge Monas.
Maybe the projection system works better with a clear backdrop.
Right.
Which is why it didn't look as convincing as the others, perhaps.
Again, that's a possibility. And also, people have talked about the beautiful clear blue skies on 9/11, totally clear. And we know about the hurricane and how that weather system seems to have been steered and manipulated. Was again that those blue skies necessary for this, this illusion to be created? Again, we can't necessarily connect the two.
I want to mention the obvious connection that the use of blue, or why they use the blue, blue color. I mean, we could look at the blue in the flag of Israel. Then we can look at the blue lodge within Freemasonry. The water again.
Everywhere you go, you'll find the blue.
Was again those blue skies necessary for this illusion to be created?
Blue lasers have many applications, including magnetic levitation devices and handheld video projectors.
Right, so you've got Project Bluebeam. You've got this advertising company called Blue Blast Media.
If you do have access to a blue laser, you would want to make a rather thin emulsion, because then more light can penetrate the emulsion, giving you a brighter hologram.
You know the quote, a cataclysmic event like a new Pearl Harbor? A lot of truthers will quote the Project for a New American Century. In particular, the Rebuilding America's Defenses document. If you read this entire document, you'll see that it's about military dominance on the ground, in the sea, in the air, in space, in cyberspace. So I notice when people quote this, they never discuss the space part of it. As a matter of fact, they'll play it down as much as they can.
And that's been looked at. It's tough. It's a tough problem. It's almost ruled out there. I don't think we have such a weapon. Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
Of alien interaction on planet Earth. But I have to say at this point that I don't know if those documents were really telling the truth or not. They could have been showing me these things so that eventually I would go out and talk about this. And maybe that'll become clear to you later why they may have done that.
Good morning, my name is Carol Rosen. In 1974, after being a 6th grade school teacher, I was introduced to the late Dr. Wernher von Braun in the U.S., the father of rocketry. In my first meeting with him, during that first 3.5 hours, he said to me, Carol, you will stop the weaponization of space. And I said, teachers don't stop until June. He said, no, you have to understand, this is February, and we have to prevent the weaponization of space because there is a lie being told to everyone that the weaponization of space is now first being based upon the evil empire, the Russians. There are many enemies, he said, against whom we're going to build this space-based weapon system. The first of whom was the Russians, which was existing at that time. Then there would be terrorists. Then there would be third world countries. Now we call them rogue nations or nations of concern. Then there would be asteroids. And then he would repeat to me over and over, and the last card would be the extraterrestrial threat.
There are two different space programs. One is what the public gets to see, and the other one is a secret space program that nobody gets to see.
Magic?
Sure it is. It is innovation in space.
Now, why is it so hard for people to accept this information?
A volunteer is told that he's taking part in a visual perception test. What he doesn't know is that the other participants are actors, and he's the only person taking part in the real test, which is actually about group conformity.
Please begin. The experiment you will be taking part in today involves the perception of line length. Your task will be simply to look at the line here on the left and indicate which of the 3 lines on the right is equal to it in length. So, for example, if you...
The actors have been told to match the wrong lines. The volunteer will be monitored to see if he gives the correct answer or if he goes along with the opinion of the group and gives the wrong answer. In the first test, the correct answer is 2.
1. 1. 1. 2.
1. Once again, the correct answer is 2.
3. 3. 3. 3.
3. Group dynamics is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology.
That the people who came up with this technology were just creative writers with wild imaginations, and the real scientists in the Defense Department just figured out how to make it real and bring it to life. You know what I think this is?
Sort of a propaganda tactic, or what I would call psychological war.
Modern war has become a struggle for men's minds as well as for their bodies. Today,
in 1952, General Robert McClure's years of lobbying finally resulted in the opening of a training center eventually known as the U.S. Army's Special Warfare Center at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Psychological Operations, or PSYOP, became the new, all-encompassing American military term for persuasion efforts.
In this next segment, I'm going to be presenting evidence of a psychological operation that was conducted a long time ago. Now, comparisons are going to be drawn between that event and the events of September 11th. This is in no way meant to be disrespectful to the victims that died that day.
I was there watching 9/11 pretty much from the moment it was first, what we saw on television, and there was just something that just did not sit right for me. It just did not seem real. It looked like something that had been faked. I couldn't help but think about the radio broadcast of the War of the Worlds at the time as well, and that really stuck in my mind. That did for many, many years afterwards.
In support of strategic operation, radio may be highly effective, limited only by the range of the transmitter and the availability of radio receivers. Psychological warfare broadcasts are flexible and can be altered swiftly to fit a changing situation.
Nice to learn that a story which has become familiar to children through the medium of comic strips.
After what has been a closely guarded secret for nearly 50 years, Orson Welles' original broadcast turns out to be no mere show business stunt.
Should have had such an immediate and profound effect upon radio listeners.
But instead was a complex psychological warfare test conducted by C.D. Jackson for the Rockefeller Foundation. When the results are compiled nearly 2 years later, they are released to an elite whose names most men will not speak of over a whisper. Among them groups like the Bilderbergers, Trilateral Commission, CFR, and the Federal Reserve.
C.D. Jackson was the equivalent of being the head of the National Security Council in the White House under Eisenhower. He was the chief of psychological warfare.
One of the chaps that was involved with the radio research project was Frank Stanton, who was a market researcher for CBS. He ended up becoming the president of CBS for many, many years. He was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Afterwards, he was the head of the RAND Corporation. He had the ear of the Rockefellers and all the rest of it.
It was October 30th, the eve of Halloween, a night known variously as Mischief Night, Devil's Night, Hell Night. A night that for some 200 years had unleashed all manner of trickery on the unsuspecting.
So he had the means to carry out this extensive study of how many people listened to the War of the Worlds broadcast in the days, weeks, months afterwards, how they reacted to it, that sort of thing. They also commissioned a number of other surveys. There was a Gallup poll that was conducted, and George Gallup was a good friend of Rockefeller as well.
The Columbia Broadcasting System and its affiliated stations present Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater on the Air in The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Ladies and gentlemen, the director of the Mercury Theater and star of these broadcasts, Orson Welles. We interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News.
Probably a meteorite of unusual size, and its arrival at this particular time is merely a coincidence.
I do see those parallels. For one is the dust cloud, for example, on 9/11, and you see the footage of people running away and all that.
Dude, this is like a scene out of a fucking movie.
Rise like a line of new towers on the city's west side. It strikes them head on. Lord, they're turning into flames.
Which made me think about that section of the War of the Worlds broadcast where we have the black smoke. I don't like the comparison in terms because of it being black.
Fuming, yeah. Smoke comes out, black smoke drifting over the city. People in the streets see it now.
People piling onto the ships and leaving as well and all that, like with the ferries in New York on 9/11.
They're running toward the East River, thousands of them.
As it's moving through the streets, section by section, people running away and that.
Dropping in like rats. Now the smoke's spreading faster. It's reached Times Square.
And people getting caught in the dust cloud and choking, all that kind of thing. It really does parallel that.
People are trying to run away from it, but it's no use. They're falling like flies. Now the smoke's crossing 6th Avenue.
And the reporter is actually it's moving this street, it's now on the next street, it's now on the next street.
5th Avenue. 100 yards away. It's 50 feet.
People might look at it and say, oh, that's a bit of a stretch,
Yeah. I personally don't think this is a stretch at all, especially when you consider who it was that was making sure that the Port Authority got these towers built.
Lower Manhattan was deteriorating, and a radical plan for its revitalization was championed by David Rockefeller and his brother Nelson, then governor of New York. With Mayor John Lindsay on board, they set out to build a trade center, the likes of which the world had never seen, and on a shocking scale. 2 110-story towers.
The impression that I built up just from what you told me today, the Rockefellers had this project to see how they could influence people's behavior and opinions and perception. And that project was in the control of people like Orson Welles. They may have not known fully what the Rockefellers were trying to get from it, but
there are a lot of coincidences.
Right. That was the feeling.
Especially with Welles, yeah.
Yeah, that was the feeling.
I actually was there and saw the building collapse. Was there.
We're saying to anyone who dares to attack us, do not do it. You couldn't win. The result will be devastating. I think you're saying the same.
Only now has the government officially acknowledged the existence of Area 51 in Nevada. Back in 1985, when CBS News hired a small plane to go looking for the F-117, an Air Force jet suddenly came up to chase us away. But that was nearly 30 years ago.
I'd be really interested to know what they were spending billions of dollars on at that base for the last 30 years.
It's a 30-year-old conspiracy.
Wake up!
I think Eisenhower wanted peace, but I think this wasn't his decision to make. And he tried to explain that to us in the only way he knew wouldn't get him killed.
The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
I think he was well aware what would happen to someone who spoke out against these people.
Should there be any concern, sir, over national security at a time like this? No, I think the whole nation now would be almost all of us security agents.
The alternative stories we've been given by the truth movement are just as big a lies as the official story of Muslims crashing airplanes. These theories and lies have been put out in order to cover up and hide the truth of secret advanced technology being used at all 3 locations. When you look at all of the evidence, it points to a much more sinister plan, a conspiracy that's decades long. A cover-up with multiple layers that's still working to this day.
Rob, it's a 30-year-old conspiracy. No, I'm talking about 9/11. I'm talking about 9/11. 9/11. 9/11. That's what I'm talking about. Oh, you are. You mean?
When they put it on me, I tell them this. I'm all about peace and love. They're calling me a terrorist, like they don't know who the terror is. Insulting my intelligence. Oh, how these people judge.
It seems like the ragheads and packies are worrying your dad, but your dad's favorite food is curry and kebab. It's funny but it's sad how they make your mommy hurry with her bags, rather read the Sun and study all the facts. Tell me, what's the bigger threat to human society? BAE systems or homemade IEDs, remote control drones, killing off human lives, or man with homemade bomb committing suicide. I know you were terrified when you saw the towers fall. It's all terror, but some forms are more powerful. It seems nuts. How could there be such agony when more Israelis die from peanut allergies? It's like the definition didn't ever exist. I guess it's all just dependent who your nemesis is. Irrelevant how eloquent the rhetoric peddler is. They're telling fibs. Now tell us who the terrorist is. They're calling me a terrorist, like they don't know who the terrorist is.
So while you're sitting on the fence, why don't you check the evidence? I'll tell you something that you'll learn. World Trade Center paper doesn't burn. How could those buildings fall with a seismic impact so small?